Chapter 1751, Total Military Force. From now on, I don't have to care about the lower limit of my potential anymore. Zhou Zhou thought. The lower limit of his subject potential had already reached the level of a grade 4 Supreme God with the Supreme God body. Furthermore, it was the bottom line of all subjects. It did not only refer to the Blazing Sun God race, human race, but also the other races under the Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom. Why should he care about the lower limit of the potential of the previous mid-tier deity level advance grade? He did not know how long it would take to raise the lower limit of the potential of the subjects of the Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom to the level of a grade 4 Supreme God if he did not have a Supreme God body and only relied on newly advanced Master Gods and Supreme Gods to increase the lower limit of his potential. One Lord Talent resolved it. I can also use this Lord Talent in the future to continue improving the potential of subjects. When this Lord Talent is raised to the Supreme Will Realm or even the Will Control Realm, perhaps all the subjects under me will have the potential of the Supreme Will Realm or even the potential of the Will Control Realm. Zhou Zhou's eyes lit up. If that was the case, the potential of this Lord Talent could be described as infinite. It would not be inferior to a top Lord Talent like Heavenly Fate de Huang. As for the Lord Talent effect too, it made the strength of the subjects of the Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom reach the lower limit of the legendary tier elementary grade. In the past, because of the heavenly summoning, the lowest strength of the subjects of the Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom was an epic tier advance grade. The highest they could summon was a subject of a legendary tier advance grade, regular summon. However, now that he had this talent, the weakest subjects under him in the future would be subjects with the strength of an elementary grade legendary tier. Coupled with the lower limit of their grade 4 Supreme God potential, the speed at which they advanced to God Spirit would be extremely fast. The difficulty would also be extremely low. In other words, from now on, an extremely terrifying number of God spirits would be born in the Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom every day. Zhou Zhou was even extremely certain that it wouldn't be long before the number of God spirits under him reached the level of the number 1 faction in the myriad worlds. Moreover, one day, the number of God spirits under him would exceed the total number of God spirits in the entire Supreme Great Cosmos, even the Supreme Great Cosmos and the Crimson Great Cosmos combined. Lord Talents 3 and 4 were all used to increase the comprehension of subjects and increase their ability to comprehend skills and law skills. They were also extremely practical Lord Talents. The last Lord Talent 5 was a Lord Talent that could increase the probability of breaking through to the God Spirit realm. It increased the upper limit of the probability of breaking through and could even be useful for advancing to the Supreme God realm. Coupled with the lower limit of a grade 4 Supreme God's potential, the effect would reach a level where 1 plus 1 was greater than 2. Zhou Zhou was very satisfied after reading it. Then, he closed the Lord Talent information interface and stood up to leave the Reincarnation Sacred Palace. He came to Mu Gu's residence. They saw a golden stream of light fly out of the Scarlet Broodmother and land on the ground, revealing Wu Xian's figure after chatting with Mu Gu for a while. "Greetings, Your Majesty," Wu Xian said respectfully. Then, he took out 3 rings and handed them to Zhou Zhou. "These are my gains from the Scarlet Broodmother. Please take a look, Your Majesty." Zhou Zhou took it and checked it. Wu Xian and him split up after confirming that there was no problem. Wu Xian went to change his profession to a new recruit, while he came directly to the Gate of Summoning. Then, he called over a Master God tier advance grade Eternal Battleship as usual and he threw all 10 Guy unit recruitment books into the Gate of Summoning. Finally, he spent 100 Master God tier advance grade Divine Crystals to recruit them in one go and arranged them on this Eternal Battleship. Then, he spent another 100 Master God tier advance grade Divine Crystals to summon 66,666,600 pure-blooded dragons and placed them in another Eternal Mothership. Then, he carefully observed these dragons and discovered that he had also summoned 2 legendary dragons. One of the legendary dragons was the Death Dragon God Corzo. The other legendary dragon was the Evil Light Demon Dragon Ira. One of the 2 legendary dragons was good at the law of death, while the other walked the 2 laws of evil and light. Then, he allowed the pure-blooded dragons like them to take up their posts in the Dragon God army. Then, Zhou Zhou spent another 100 Master God tier advance grade Divine Crystals to summon the day's worth of subjects. This time, he summoned more than 27.7 billion subjects. He summoned more than 6.6 billion subjects than usual. The strongest among them were the 14 Master God tier advance grade God spirits. Then, he got his subordinates to arrange the whereabouts of these new soldiers and new subjects before heading to the Jade Capital Immortal Mountain alone. After spending 1000 low-tier deity-level elementary-grade divine crystals, he summoned 100 capital units heavenly soldiers, heavenly generals, and heavenly venerates. At this moment, swoosh, 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 swoosh. A total of 12,434 light pillars of various laws soared into the sky from the direction of the reincarnation sacred palace. Right on the heels of that, in the sky filled with stars, another 10 completely different starry sky phenomena appeared. Strange phenomena filled the sky. The gods of the myriad worlds were stunned when they saw this. A total of 20 newly advanced supreme gods were born. The birth of so many supreme gods in one go had only happened once in their history. That was when the Illusionist clan invaded their great cosmos last time. The Chaos Will specially used its power to forcefully promote thousands of master gods to become supreme gods in order to resist the invasion of the Illusionist clan. This time, even though the number of these 20 newly advanced supreme gods was far inferior to the magnificent feat of the Chaos Will last time, but the Chaos Will was forcefully created by thousands of supreme gods. And this time, it was a supreme god born naturally. There had never been so many supreme gods born at once in the history of their universe. Their meanings were completely different. In terms of shock, these newly promoted 20 supreme gods were not inferior to those thousands of supreme gods at all. They looked at the source of the 20 supreme gods again. If nothing went wrong, it was the common people's regal's blazing sun divine kingdom again. They were not surprised at all. Only the blazing sun divine kingdom of the common people's regal could do this. In this aspect, even the Lord of 10,000 Evils, Spring Autumn Dharma Lord, and God King Heaven Punishment could not do it. The Supreme Lord's 4th Reserve Army has set a new record again. Tisk tisk, 20 supreme gods were born at once. It's unprecedented and unprecedented. There's a high chance that the Supreme Lord's 4th Reserve Army can continue to break this record in the future. You're still calling him Supreme Lord's 4th Reserve Army. The common people's regal is currently the Supreme Lord's 3rd Reserve Army. He has officially surpassed the Lord of 10,000 Evils. How impressive! Lord Common People's Regal should be the first person in history to break through the sequencing barrier and be the first Reserve Army Lord to successfully advance. The Lord of 10,000 Evils hasn't had any new achievements in a long time. All the gods' god spirits have gone to the ultimate void battlefield to serve him. No. Lord Common People's Regal only went for a period of time and snatched back the ultimate void battlefield. I knew from that time that Lord Common People's Regal would surpass Lord of 10,000 Evils sooner or later, but I really didn't expect it to be so fast. Even though the Lord of 10,000 Evils didn't have much merit, he worked hard too. Everyone knows the situation in the ultimate void battleground. Is that because Lord of 10,000 Evils didn't work hard? The enemy is really too powerful. It's not something Lord of 10,000 Evils can deal with. As for why Lord Common People's Regal can change the situation the moment he goes over, it can only be said that he is worthy of being the last Supreme Lord Reserve Army that the Supreme will personally chose. Stop arguing. As far as I know, even though the Lord Common People's Regal and Lord of 10,000 Evils have only known each other for a short time, they are good friends. If they see you arguing over such a matter, they will probably not know whether to laugh or cry. I heard that too. Unbelievable. The relationship between these two Supreme Lord Reserve Armies is really unexpectedly good. At the same time, Zhou Zhou was already surrounded by these newly promoted Master Gods and Supreme Gods, and he gave them a set of divine artifacts each after chatting with them briefly. The God spirits were extremely excited and left. After they left, Zhou Fight calculated the strength of his main combat army. His original military strength had 45 Guy units, 459 capital units, 2,711, 918, 223, 878, 167 soldiers, 195,635,759,999 God spirits, 25,734,117,552 true gods, 697,352 master gods, 352 supreme gods, and 16 quasi-supreme willpower realm. Including the 20 Guy unit recruits who were recruited and changed jobs today, there were 66,666,660,000 pure-blooded dragons, 100 capital units heavenly soldiers, 122,933 newly advanced master gods, and 20 newly advanced supreme gods. The troops under him had already reached 65 Guy units, 559 capital units, 271,198,429,878,167 soldiers, 196,302,759,999 god spirits, 25,734,183,552 true gods, 820,285 supremacy gods, 372 supreme gods, and 16 quasi-supreme willpower realm. Zhou Zhou nodded in satisfaction after reading it. Chapter 1752, Reward. At the same time, Zhou Marshal had already brought Thanatos, Nazario, and 10,000 Master God tier advance grade God spirits to the Chaos Sea and met the space-time chaotic divine demons. This time, they had brought a total of 812 chaotic divine demons. Zhou Marshal was naturally very satisfied with this. The space-time chaotic divine demons brought more and more chaotic divine demons. It did not disappoint him. Since that was the case, he might as well reward them this time. Following that, he did not immediately reward them. Instead, he gave them 3,248 Master God tier divine artifacts as usual before killing the 812 chaotic divine demons with a single palm strike. Then, he looked at the space-time chaotic divine demons. Space-time, space, ancestor wind, ghost shadow. Zhou Wu said, "You've done well recently, but your realm is a little low." Upon hearing this, the space-time chaotic divine demons were stunned for a moment. Then, they suddenly thought of something, and their faces suddenly turned pale. They hurriedly knelt down and said in fear, "My lord, please don't abandon us. We have already felt the bottleneck of advancing to the Supreme God realm. As long as we wait for another 1 to 200 years, we will definitely advance to the Supreme God realm and serve your majesty well." Zhou Marshal could not help but smile when he heard that. 1 to 200 years? I'm not even that old. What would I be waiting for that period of time for? However, to be honest, 100 to 200 years was indeed an extremely short period of time for a Master God. However, it was indeed too long for him. Have you forgotten how long this emperor has been rising? Zhou Marshal said indifferently. This emperor can't wait that long. Only then did the space-time chaotic divine demons remembered his majesty's age. They were extremely disappointed and sad. Could they have just lived a good life and were about to be abandoned by his majesty? During this period of time, even though they had a tough time, they had to run around every day to contact the various chaotic divine demons in the divine demon realm who were willing to trade. However, other than being a little tired, they enjoyed the rest of the work very much. The flattery of his peers, the countless divine crystals, the inexhaustible number of Master God tier divine artifacts, the vast number of connections he had made. All sorts of benefits made their value, status, and strength skyrocket. In addition, they had faith in Zhou Zhou's Holy Spirit tier believers. Therefore, they enjoyed this job very much. However, this job seemed to be abandoning them because they were too weak. They were very reluctant, but they were also very helpless. This was because Master God tier's strength did not seem to be worthy of his majesty. They had seen the advancement phenomenon that had appeared in the myriad worlds cosmos over the past few days after all. Naturally, they did not make a mistake today. The birth of a total of 20 newly promoted supreme gods shocked them. His Majesty could even buy supreme gods at wholesale prices, so it seemed normal for him to look down on Master God tiers like them. They immediately fell silent thinking of this. What are you thinking? Zhou Marshal shook his head and threw over 4 bottles of pills. These are pills for advancing to the Supreme God level. They're called the Extreme Heart Pill. They can allow your will to break through to the will divine transformation realm. Your cultivation level has already reached the limit of a Master God tier advance grade. When your will breaks through to the will divine transformation realm, you will naturally break through to the Supreme God level. There's no need to return to the divine demon realm today. Take the Extreme Heart Pill to the Reincarnation Sacred Palace in the divine capital and go into seclusion. You will be able to advance to a grade 1 Supreme God tomorrow. However, a grade 1 Supreme God is not enough. When you go back tomorrow, find 20 chaotic divine demons at Master God tier advance grade as soon as possible. This emperor will also bestow this Extreme Heart Pill to them, allowing them to advance to the level of a grade 1 Supreme God. They will listen to you in the future. From now on, you can walk in the Fiend Celestial world with the strength of 25 grade 1 Supreme Gods and collect more Chaos Divine treasures for this emperor. After Zhou Fight said that, he looked at their reaction. The space-time chaotic divine demons thought that they had heard wrongly at first, but they could not react in time. They immediately revealed an ecstatic expression by the time they reacted. They were not only happy that they had the chance to become a supreme god. The real reason for their joy was that His Majesty did not abandon them. "Thank you, Your Majesty. However, Your Majesty, this extreme heart pill is too precious. We..." The space-time chaotic divine demon, they immediately knelt down and said gratefully. Then, they looked hesitantly at the extreme heart pill in Zhou Marshall's hand. This was a top-notch divine medicine that could allow a master god to become a supreme god. How many supreme gods were there in the entire supreme great cosmos? However, these 4 pills could create 4 newly promoted supreme gods. They naturally understood the preciousness of this kind of divine medicine. "It's a reward for you. Just take it. Don't dawdle." Zhou Marshall frowned. This extreme heart pill was only a supreme god level pill. With his supreme unique lord talent, he actually had quite a number of extreme heart pills and items similar to the extreme heart pill's functions. Therefore, he naturally did not feel any heartache for the pills rewarded to them. "Yes, Your Majesty." The space-time chaotic divine demon did not dare to say anything else and immediately said respectfully. When Zhou Marshall saw this, he nodded slightly. His efficiency in obtaining the Chaos Divine Treasure had greatly increased even with the location of Tianjun's corpse. Compared to Tianjun's corpse, the Chaos Divine Treasures produced in the Demon God Divine World and the Time Ruins were considered few. However, a mosquito's leg still had meat. Naturally, Zhou Marshall would not mind. Furthermore, with his help, when the space-time chaotic divine demons they returned, they would be able to give him more chaotic divine demons. When that happened, he would be able to obtain more chaotic divine treasures. Zhou Zhou had a feeling. The Supreme will seem to have the intention of letting he support the Supreme Great Cosmos or even the Scarlet Great Cosmos to produce more Master God tier kingdoms, or even Supreme God kingdoms. Otherwise, it would be impossible for him to have so many impossible requirements in his advancement requirements. Since the Supreme will wanted him to do it, he would do it himself. In any case, with the personality of the Supreme Will, he would not mistreat himself. Zhou Marshall did not stop after that. He obtained a total of 3,248 units of Chaos Divine Treasures after extracting the loots. Then, they brought the space-time chaotic divine demons to the time ruins of Chaos Death and obtained another 170 units of Chaos Divine Treasures. At this point, the number of Chaos Divine Treasures he had reached 26,461 units. Zhou Marshall looked at these Chaos Divine Treasures and felt a little regretful. The Chaos Divine Treasures were far from enough, but the requirements to conquer 10 beginner-grade Master God tier kingdoms were far from enough. Still, it should be completed in 2 days. At that time, his main body could upgrade his territory. Chapter 1753, Zhou Fights Choice. The Yellow River region. Accompanied by a spatial fluctuation, a total of 10 Supreme God-level cosmic battleships and more than 10,000 Master God tier battleships slowly appeared from space. In the leading Supreme God-level cosmic battleship, the Common People's battleship Zhou Fight sat in the main seat. On both sides of him stood the generals of the Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom. Bai Yun, Wu Xin, Feng Luo, Nazario, Qi Xiantian, Terence, the Primordial Dragon. Almost all the most famous generals of the Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom were gathered here. In order to show how important the Yellow River Realm battlefield was, Zhou Fight even brought 30 Gai unit soldiers, 500 billion god spirits, 10 billion true god tiers, 500,000 supremacy gods, 200 supreme gods, and 10 quasi-supreme will realm experts. It could be said that half of the Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom's main combat strength had been brought to the Yellow River region by him. In addition, a large number of resources compatible with war were also stored in the Supreme God-level battleships and Master God tier battleships under him. They were already prepared to fight a resource war and a protracted war. All of this was for the war with the illusionary race. At this moment, a figure appeared in front of him. It was the reincarnation Will. He looked at Zhou Fight and a smile appeared on his face. Then, he sensed something and his face instantly turned into shock. "Brother, you brought so many subordinates?" he asked in surprise. In fact, what he wanted to ask was where he got so many powerful subordinates, especially the 10 quasi-supreme will realm experts. However, if he asked directly, he seemed to look down on his younger brother. That was why he asked. Zhou Fight smiled and said, "The enemy is powerful and can't be underestimated. To be safe, we can only bring more soldiers over. The reincarnation will nodded slowly and reluctantly accepted this explanation. Zhou Fight asked, "Brother, how's the situation on your side?" The reincarnation will said, "After I returned yesterday, I immediately mobilized the army and started a full-scale war with the Illusionist clan. After the Death Whisperer died, the morale of the Illusionist clan plummeted as we expected. I took the opportunity to take back many territories in the Yellow River region. Right now, about 80% of the Yellow River region is still in the hands of the Illusionist clan, and only 20% belongs to us." Zhou Fight's heart sank. They had already taken back a portion of their territory, but they still only had 20% of it. So before they could take back this portion of territory, the Yellow River region had already been occupied by the other party, right? Damn it, I'm the lord of the Yellow River realm now. Those territories that haven't been taken back are all my territories. At the thought of this, the thought of snatching back the Yellow River region in his heart became stronger. "Big brother, how's the war going?" Zhou Fight asked. Even though he was anxious to take back the entire Yellow River realm, he didn't rashly rush out to fight. That wasn't in line with his personality. He had long developed a habit of making plans before taking action. An obvious smile appeared on the reincarnation Will's face hearing Zhou Fight's question. He patted Zhou Fight's shoulder and smiled. Even though the soldiers of the illusionary race are powerful and their methods are strange and unpredictable, after the death of the Death Whisperer, their morale decreased greatly, especially the soldiers of the Death Whisperer's headquarters. They fell into a huge panic, and their overall combat strength decreased by more than 30%. This was not the most important thing. The most important thing is still you. Zhou Fight was stunned. Me? I just got here, didn't I? Haha. When the reincarnation will saw the expression on Zhou Fight's face, he could not help but laugh and say, "Brother, have you forgotten the batch of divine artifacts you gave me? With the batch of divine artifacts you gave me, the god spirits under my command have already put on a complete set of divine artifacts. Their combat strength has increased by more than 4 to 5 times with the enhancement of the entire set of divine artifacts. It can be said that the strength of the army under me, the strength of the reincarnation will and my strength has increased by 4 to 5 times because of the divine artifacts you gave me. This allowed us to defeat the illusionary army easily and take back the territory of the Yellow River realm in our battle with the illusionary race. If not for this, even if the Death Whisperer died, it would be very difficult for us to make the territory of the Yellow River realm in our hands reach 20% in a day. Brother, I really have to thank you." The reincarnation will looked at Zhou Fight, his eyes filled with sincerity and satisfaction. "If only I could wear a full set of will holy artifacts one day." Towards the end, reincarnation will suddenly sighed. Then, he glanced at Zhou Fight. Zhou Fight immediately understood what the other party meant. He smiled and said, "If I can really gather a set of willpower holy artifacts that are suitable for brother in the future, I will definitely give them to you immediately." "Promise?" The reincarnation Will's eyes lit up. He naturally didn't believe what others said. However, if it was he who said this, he would believe it too much. The subordinate of him who was dressed slowly was the best proof. Even though a full set of will holy artifacts was very difficult, with this example, it was not impossible. Zhou Fight nodded. When he upgraded Heavenly Fate De Huang to the Supreme Will Realm Lord Talent, there was a high chance that he could upgrade the Supreme Divine Artifact that dropped from the enemy to a Will Holy Artifact. At that time, it would just be a set of Will Holy Artifacts. It would be easy. Hence, Zhou Fight agreed without any pressure. The reincarnation will was very good to him. If he became rich, so what if he gave it a set of Will Holy Artifacts? When the reincarnation will saw Zhou Fight's reaction, it felt very comfortable. However, he did not forget the serious matter. "Are you planning to act with me next, or do you have other thoughts?" The reincarnation will asked. "Brother, do you have the current map of the Yellow River region? It's best if you have the military power of the illusionary race." Zhou Fight said. "Yes. I'll share it with you." The reincarnation will nodded. Then, he directly handed the Yellow River region's military power distribution map to the other party through his personal terminal. At the same time, he projected a copy. "My current army is attacking this position." The reincarnation will pointed at a place where the Illusionist clan was densely distributed. Zhou Fight looked at the map projected in front of him and thought for a moment. Finally, he pointed to another location in the southeast. Even though the strength of the Illusionist clan in this position was not as strong as the attack of the reincarnation will, the military power of the Illusionist clan was also very dense. Are you sure you want to attack the plains of death? The reincarnation will raised his eyebrows and asked. He also knew that there were more than 100 quasi-supreme will realm experts in this position. There was no need to mention anything else. It far exceeded the group of soldiers that Zhou Fight had brought. Zhou Zhou chose to agree without hesitation. When the reincarnation will saw this, even though it wanted to say something, he did not say anything in the end. He believed that he would never do anything stupid. Let me know if anything happens. I can rush over immediately. The reincarnation will said. Sorry to trouble you, brother. Zhou Fight did not refuse his help. Chapter 1754, Conquering the Illusionary Kingdom of Death. The reincarnation will left. The battlefield on his side was the main battleground against the Illusionist clan. They could not afford to be careless. It would be good enough if he could take the time to visit his younger brother. Now that he was unwilling to fight the enemies of the Illusionist clan with him, he had to hurry back and take charge of the overall situation. Zhou Fight did not waste any time and immediately led his army to the Plains of Death after the reincarnation will left. The Plains of Death. This was a very important territory in the Yellow River region. It occupied about 1/20th of the territory of the Yellow River region. According to the size of the boundless universe, the territory of the Plains of Death was comparable to the territory of hundreds of boundless universes. Due to the vastness of the Death Plains and the rich power of death, a large number of souls had gathered here, forming ghost cities and even ghost kingdoms. Among them, the powerful ghost kingdom was not inferior to the divine kingdom lords in the modern world in terms of scale. Originally, this place had been safe and sound. At most, the undead forces would compete with each other for supremacy. However, everything changed after the Illusionist clan arrived. The Illusionist clan wiped out all the undead forces on the plane of death in a short period of time and established an Illusionist kingdom, Illusionist Death. The rulers of the Illusionist clan enslaved all the undead on the plains of death. Not only did they make them their slaves, but they also used them to refine divine artifacts and practice cultivation techniques. In a short period of time, the number of undead on the plains of death had decreased to about 70%. The death of a large number of undead naturally aroused the dissatisfaction and resistance of these undead. However, in the face of the strong suppression of the Illusionist clan, they had no power to resist. They could only watch helplessly as they either became traitors to the undead and served the Illusionist clan, or they could only watch helplessly as their fellow undead disappeared one by one. When Zhou Fight led the cosmic battleship here, he witnessed and understood everything. When Zhou Fight led the cosmic battleship here, he witnessed and understood everything. It was the Illusionist clan that established the Illusionist Death Kingdom. The tragic lives of the people of foreign races were reflected in his eyes. All of you deserve to die. The Zhou Fight said coldly. Then, as he read on, he suddenly raised his brows. That was because he suddenly realized that this illusionary kingdom of death was actually a beginner-grade master god tier kingdom. He thought for a moment and understood. This was too normal. The Illusionist clan had abundant resources and gathered the strength of the entire clan. Not to mention establishing a beginner-grade master god tier kingdom, even establishing 10 beginner-grade master god tier kingdoms would be a piece of cake for them. A smile appeared on his face. It's really a silver lining. This time, there was another source of beginner-grade master god tier kingdom. Even though the number of beginner-grade master god tier kingdoms of the illusionary race was definitely the priority, it was definitely enough for him now. He no longer hesitated thinking of this. He immediately ordered all the soldiers to fly out of the cosmic battleship and attack the Illusionist clan below. At the same time, he also activated the Grade 3 Supreme God Realm domain skill, Land of Earth, a Minister of the King. Then, he set up 2 domain rules. The first rule, your own attack will not harm the undead race. They were his subjects after all. Zhou Fight did not want to hurt his own people. The second rule was to suppress the conceptual ability of the Illusionist clan as much as possible. The conceptual power of the Illusionist clan was strange and unpredictable. Even he might fall for it if he was not careful. Not to mention his subordinates. Therefore, in order to prevent the conceptual god's ability from harming the soldiers under him, Zhou Fight specially set this rule. His Land of Earth, a Minister of the King, as a Grade 3 Supreme God Realm domain skill, could even suppress the will skill of a low-level Supreme Will Realm expert, let alone the concept god ability of the Illusionist clan. As long as it was not the conceptual divine ability of a middle-level Supreme Will Realm expert or a higher-level expert of the Illusionist clan, Zhou Fight was confident that he could suppress it to the greatest extent. In the blink of an eye, the army of the Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom had already charged towards the illusionary kingdom below after receiving the order. The cosmic warships under Zhou Fight also began to attack the illusionary kingdom below continuously. A large number of the Illusionist clan died in the Illusionist kingdom below almost in an instant. Only then did they realize that an enemy was attacking them. The enemy is attacking. Retaliate quickly. Who dares to attack our illusionary kingdom of death? How audacious! He actually ambushed us. It must be the reincarnation will. I've already heard that they have officially started a war with our main army and are currently fighting fiercely. I didn't expect them to dare to send troops to launch a sneak attack on our illusionary kingdom of death. A war between two fronts, humph. What boldness! All troops, listen up. Kill these reckless fellows. The Illusionist clan reacted quickly and immediately organized their forces to counterattack the Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom. However, with Zhou Fight's Land of Earth, a minister of the king's domain, the concept gods' power cast by them were reduced by more than 80%. The remaining power did not pose much of a threat to the soldiers of the Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom. The members of the Illusionist clan were stunned when they saw this. They couldn't understand their own concept. Why was God's power so weak? This was almost no different from not having any effect. However, the soldiers who rose from the Blazing Sun did not care about their feelings. While they were in a daze, the soldiers of the Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom launched a fierce offensive without hesitation. In less than a moment, the territory of the illusionary race was completely occupied by the soldiers of the Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom. All the Illusionist clan members were dead. None of them survived. On the other hand, the undead in it were unscathed. They were even surprised that they were unharmed. With the intensity of the battle just now, it was not an exaggeration to say that even a quasi-supreme will realm expert would die in the aftershock of the battle after all. Zhou Fight did not explain. He was naturally not satisfied with the results of the battle. Therefore, he did not stop and immediately led the soldiers to continue their offensive. 2 hours later, the illusionary Death Beginner Grade Master God Tier Kingdom was completely destroyed. Even though there were more than 100 quasi-supreme will realm experts in the illusionary Death Kingdom, they was unable to retaliate at all and was quickly defeated with Zhou Fight personally participating in the battle. Zhou Fight's expression was calm. With his current combat strength, he could even fight a low-level supreme will realm expert and even have a high chance of winning. A mere 100 quasi-supreme will realm experts were naturally easy to capture. However, what made him the happiest was the fact that he had conquered a beginner-grade Master God Tier Kingdom. I'm one step closer to upgrading my territory. Zhou Fight thought to himself. Chapter 1755, 8 Beginner-Grade Master God Tier Kingdoms. After Zhou Fight conquered the Plains of Death, he opened the military distribution map of the Yellow River region that the Reincarnation Will had shared with him. He looked at the distribution of the forces of the Illusionist clan marked with red dots with a burning light in his eyes. The Illusionist clan had established many beginner-grade Master God Tier Kingdoms in the Yellow River region. If he worked harder today, he might be able to upgrade his territory tonight. However, even though there are many beginner-grade Master God Tier countries here, we can't be rash. With my current strength, I can at most deal with a low-level Supreme Will Realm expert. This is only possible when I use my full combat strength. If I want to be safe, it's best to only attack those forces of the Illusionist clan that are protected by quasi-supreme will realm experts. Zhou Fight thought to himself. Even though he, an expert with the combat strength of a low-level supreme will realm, seemed to be breaking the rules when dealing with these weaklings. They were only at the grade 3 supreme god realm. In fact, he was the challenger. No one could say anything. Therefore, his behavior wasn't considered a violation of the rules. This was called having the ability. Just do it. I'll only challenge the beginner-grade Master God Tier Kingdom that has the highest protection from a quasi-supreme will realm expert. At the thought of this, Zhou Fight immediately made up his mind. Then, he did not waste any time and immediately led the army to the next beginner-grade Master God Tier Kingdom of the illusionary race. Only a large number of undead remained, worshipping the direction they left in fervently. They already knew that the one who saved they was the new leader of the Yellow River region, as well as the third successor of the Supreme Will. He was young, but he was powerful. He was benevolent and compassionate. He liked to save the common people. At the same time, his status was extremely high. In their hearts, the common people's regal was already the new ruler that they yearned for the most, welcomed, and revered after the will of Yellow River. On the other side, Zhou Fight and they had already arrived at the second territory they wanted to conquer with the supreme god-level cosmic battleship. The second beginner-grade master god-tier kingdom of the illusionary race was called the Dark Realm. This was originally a paradise for the undead. They were suppressed by the Illusionist clan and became the subjects of the Illusionist clan after the Illusionist clan arrived. Exploitation, enslavement, beating, scolding, killing. All kinds of scenes were common every day. Seeing this, Zhou Fight did not hold back at all. He led his army and conquered it in just over an hour. The overall strength of the Dark region was even inferior to the Plains of Death. There were less than 50 quasi-supreme will realm experts. With such strength, even if Zhou Fight did not take action himself, just the 10 quasi-supreme will realm experts under him and the various buffs of the Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom were enough to easily destroy them. And so, after Zhou Fight came to the Yellow River region, he obtained the second beginner-grade Master God-tier kingdom. Continue. Zhou Fight was very satisfied with the results of the battle. He chose to continue expanding the scope of the war without hesitation. Time passed quickly. When night fell, Zhou Fight had conquered 8 beginner-grade Master God-tier kingdoms. Zhou Fight was very satisfied with this. Coupled with 2 beginner-grade Master God-tier kingdoms, he would be able to upgrade his territory to Grade 1 Supreme God. This Yellow River realm is really a treasure land for me. Zhou Fight's eyes lit up as he thought. Hurry up. I'll try to meet the requirements to upgrade my territory today. Zhou Fight did not waste any time and immediately rushed to the next beginner-grade Master God-tier kingdom. However, an accident happened in this beginner-grade Master God-tier kingdom. East Heaven beginner-grade Master God-tier kingdom. This beginner-grade Master God-tier kingdom was also established by a quasi-supreme will realm expert of the illusionary race. It carried nearly 200 quasi-supreme will realm experts. The ruler of his kingdom was called Dong Tian. He was a quasi-supreme will realm illusionist clan expert who had mastered the power of the conceptual god of gender transformation. As long as one looked into his eyes, any living being with the concept of gender would change from a man to a woman, or from a woman to a man. Moreover, the existence that was transformed into another gender would lose all the abilities of the previous gender. Which meant, when a male life form was turned into a female by the East Heaven, he would lose all his male abilities, including combat strength, thinking ability, and even personality. Even his memories would be distorted to varying degrees. This was undoubtedly an extremely powerful ability. Even in the Illusionist clan, the power of this concept was shocking. Especially for the Illusionist clan that had gender differences, it was enough for them to hide far away. However, Dong Tian, whom the Illusionist clan didn't dare to face, looked terrified. This was because he had just received news that the third reserve arm of the Supreme Lord, the common people's regal, who also held the fragment of the legendary tier sacred seal, was carrying out an unscrupulous conquest in the Yellow River region. The other party had already conquered 2/5 of the Yellow River region. According to the information he had obtained, the other party's next target was very likely to be his beginner-grade Master God-tier kingdom. He was very afraid of this. This was because he knew that as a powerhouse of the Illusionist clan who had mastered the conceptual god ability of the Demon Eye of Transformation, even though he was very famous in the Illusionist clan, in the eyes of the common people's regal, he was probably not much different from the other powerhouses of the Illusionist clan who had been conquered by him. He had heard that the other party had killed a quasi-supreme will realm expert like slaughtering a dog. His true combat strength was probably already comparable to a true supreme will realm expert. Coupled with the legendary legendary tier sage seal. How could he not panic? What should we do? Dong Tian grabbed his hair as he thought of a solution. He was originally a living being whose appearance was so beautiful that it was almost impossible to differentiate between a man and a woman. However, his actions at this moment made he look somewhat miserable. However, facing the common people's regal who was about to arrive with the fragment of the illusionary legendary tier sacred seal, he couldn't be more embarrassed. At this moment, a cold and arrogant male voice sounded in his ears. East Heaven suddenly looked up and saw a cold-looking man in a gorgeous royal robe with his hair scattered. He had a carefree and unruly temperament as he stood not far away, looking at him as if he was looking at an ant. Dong Tian should have been angry at the other party's gaze. However, when he realized who the person in front of him was, he immediately revealed an ecstatic expression. Lord Martial Emperor! Why are you here? Shouldn't you be fighting the experts of the reincarnation will on the main battlefield? The fearless king knows that the common people's regal is about to attack your beginner-grade master god tier kingdom. In order to prevent the other party from achieving his goal, the fearless king specially got this divine being to support you ants. The martial emperor said arrogantly. Dong Tian heaved a sigh of relief and a smile appeared on his face. With Lord Martial Emperor around, the upcoming war should be settled. Chapter 1756, Battling the Martial Emperor. 1. Dong Tian looked at the Martial Emperor in awe. This lord, who was respectfully addressed as a Martial Emperor, was known as the strongest martial arts expert among the Supreme Will Realm experts. His conceptual divine power was also known by everyone. His name was Martial Emperor. The specific effect was, the Martial Emperor would automatically replicate and master the other party's martial arts abilities when his enemy mastered martial arts abilities, and he would be able to reach a higher level. With this ability, the Martial Emperor began to rise when he was weak. After countless years, he had already grasped the abilities of countless martial arts experts. He had already integrated these martial arts abilities and formed his own martial arts school. He called it the Martial Emperor Arts Style, and he had also successfully advanced to the Supreme Will Realm with his martial arts. Ordinary middle-stage Supreme Will Realm experts did not dare to look down on him, even though he was only a low-level Supreme Will Realm expert. Even high-level Supreme Will Realm experts admired his potential and felt that it was very likely that he would advance to mid-level Supreme Will Realm in the future. If he encountered a high-level Supreme Will Realm expert who was good at martial arts and the Martial Emperor relied on his conceptual divine ability to replicate the other party's martial arts ability, it was not impossible for him to advance to the upper stage Supreme Will Realm in the future. The Martial Emperor had the same thought. In the illusionary world, his martial arts ability had reached an invincible level. He had once been in seclusion for a long period of time. He wanted to rely on himself to comprehend higher-level martial arts abilities so that he could advance. However, he immediately came to a realization when he didn't receive the feedback he deserved after a long period of seclusion. Rely on myself? Whatever for? Wouldn't it be better to rely on my conceptual ability to freeload? However, he could no longer find a suitable duplicate in the illusionary world. What should he do? He quickly thought of a solution. He would head to the real universe, which was the ultimate void great cosmos, and seek the opportunity to break through from the supreme willpower experts in the alternate universe. Therefore, he followed the army of the illusionary race here. However, things didn't go as smoothly as he had imagined. Even though the supreme great cosmos also had supreme will realm experts who were good at martial arts, there were not many of them. In addition, the Supreme Will had used some unknown method to figure out the conceptual divine power of the Martial Emperor. It had even ordered that no experts who were good at martial arts were allowed to approach the Martial Emperor. This made the Martial Emperor, who wanted to replicate his martial arts ability, feel extremely uncomfortable. However, it was definitely impossible to make the Martial Emperor give up on his goal just because of this. Thus, the Martial Emperor stayed here until he received the order from the fearless king today. Originally, he was too lazy to come here. However, the fearless king's strength far exceeded his, and the conceptual god's abilities were extremely effective against him. Therefore, he had no choice but to come. He casually asked, "Is this common people's regal good at martial arts?" Well, Dong Tian hesitated for a moment before saying, "He should be good at it. This subordinate has never fought with him before, but I've heard that he is extremely powerful. I'm not too sure about the rest." The Martial Emperor nodded coldly. He actually wasn't too interested in him even if common people's regal was really good at martial arts. He was just a grade 3 supreme god realm. How high could his martial arts realm be even if he was good at martial arts? Even if he relied on some secret technique to obtain the strength of a low-level supreme will realm expert, it was not important to him. What he wanted was never an opponent, but a supplement that could raise his martial arts realm. As far as he knew, common people's regal did not meet the definition of supplements in his eyes. One look at the other party's expression and he knew that the other party was looking down on this third reserve member of the Supreme Lord. He could not help but say, "Martial Emperor, even though that common people's regal is only a grade 3 supreme god realm, he can also kill Lord Death Whisperer, who is a low-level supreme will realm expert, with his secret technique. Moreover, as far as I know, the other party once revealed his martial arts ability in the Yellow River realm. It should not be underestimated." Dong Tian did not dare to say anything else. This way, the Martial Emperor wouldn't think that he was boosting others' prestige. Oh! The Martial Emperor's interest was piqued. Was he really good at martial arts? Since he was the successor of the Supreme Will, the martial arts heritage he grasped should be extraordinary, right? Perhaps it was a martial arts inheritance at the Supreme Will realm. Thinking of this, he had a slight desire to fight the other party. I hope that his martial arts will not disappoint me, the Martial Emperor said calmly. Dong Tian agreed with a flattering expression. At this moment, a Grade 1 Supreme God-level Illusionist clan suddenly appeared in front of them. Greetings, Lord Dong Tian. Greetings, Martial Emperor. When he saw the Martial Emperor, he was obviously shocked. Then, he said respectfully in surprise. The Martial Emperor was a famous martial arts expert and a star in the illusionary world. He was very famous in the illusionary world. The Martial Emperor nodded lightly. My lords, I just received news that the Common People's Regal has piloted a cosmic battleship to the territory of our beginner-grade Master God tier kingdom. Currently, they have already begun to attack the Illusionist clan subjects in our kingdom. Many subjects of the Illusionist clan have already died under the large-scale attacks of the other party. Dong Tian frowned slightly and asked, don't the undead live with the Illusionist clan? Does he not even want the creatures in their supreme great cosmos anymore? Chapter 1757, Battling a Martial Monarch Realm Expert. 2. This was an order that he had specially given to prevent the Supreme Will from sending troops to attack his divine kingdom. He did not expect it not to work. The Grade 1 Supreme God said, the other party used a special method to make them attack and only hurt our people, not the undead. Dong Tian's frown deepened. This Common People's Regal had quite a few tricks up his sleeve. He saw the Martial Emperor raise his hand and sneer just as he was about to ask for more information. Take me to see this Common People's Regal. Humph. A Supreme Lord Reserve who just took office dares to be so arrogant. Then I'll let him become the first Supreme Lord Reserve to die in our hands. Martial Emperor, don't let your guard down. Seeing this, Dong Tian hurriedly said, the other party seems to have grasped the fragment of the legendary tier illusionary holy seal. That legendary holy artifact is not easy to deal with. What power can a Grade 3 Supreme God realm possibly unleash even if he really grasped the fragment of the illusionary legendary tier sage seal? Don't worry, I'll do my best. And I'm not a weakling or an idiot like the Death Whisperer. You don't have to remind me. With that, the Martial Emperor had already disappeared in front of them. East Heaven Beginner Grade Master God Tier Kingdom, Puppet Ghost City. The Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom Army joined forces with many cosmic battleships to launch a blanket attack on Puppet Ghost City below. Many subjects and experts of the illusionary race were wiped out before they could react under the blanket attack of the Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom's army. The experts of the Illusionist clan and the Illusionist clan who were lucky enough to survive immediately prepared to counterattack. However, under the powerful strength of the Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom, their counterattack was almost weak and could not pose any threat to them. In less than a moment, almost all of them had been destroyed. Only the confused and excited undead and the unharmed buildings of Puppet Ghost City remained. The reason why the building was not damaged was naturally because of Zhou fight. He had only added an attack effect that could ignore buildings to the land of Earth, a minister of the king, allowing the Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom's army to ignore buildings and attack enemies inside and outside buildings. This was naturally to protect the buildings. These were all his territories after all. He still had to spend money to repair them after destroying his main body. The enemy of Puppet Ghost City has almost been eliminated. Let's go to the next city. Zhou Fight said. Yes, Your Majesty. Bai Yun said respectfully. Then, he prepared to lead the soldiers away. However, at this moment, Zhou Fight suddenly raised his eyebrows and looked ahead. More than 100 meters away, a man in a royal robe with loose hair and an arrogant and cold aura was standing there looking at him coldly. They were clearly so close, but neither the others nor the Supreme God-level cosmic battleship under his feet reacted at all. Supreme Will Realm Expert. This thought appeared in Zhou Fight's mind. Only Supreme Will Realm experts could make Supreme God-level cosmic battleships unable to discover them. You are the third reserve army of the Supreme Lord Common People's Regal. At this moment, the Martial Emperor asked. Who are you? Zhou Fight asked. I am the Martial Emperor. The Martial Emperor said coldly, it's your honor that a mere Grade 3 Supreme God realm can die in my hands. Go to hell in peace. With that, he flew straight over. At this moment, Bai Yun and the rest had already noticed the Martial Emperor. Sensing the other party's unparalleled aura and pressure, they immediately realized that this was a powerhouse that far exceeded their imagination. And they already had the strength of a top supreme god. Who else could be stronger than them? It was naturally a supreme will realm expert. After Bai Yun came up with this terrifying conjecture, she immediately wanted to order the soldiers to counterattack and protect His Majesty. However, at this moment, a calm voice reached her mind. Don't worry. This emperor can deal with him. Bai Yun's eyes widened. His Majesty could actually deal with a supreme will realm expert? She could not believe it, but when she thought of His Majesty's invincible performance, she felt that it was impossible for His Majesty to lie. But that was a supreme will realm expert. A true existence standing at the peak of the myriad worlds. Even the strongest supreme will had an attitude of roping in supreme will realm experts. Has His Majesty's current strength already reached this level? There was no time to think. This was because Zhou Fight had already begun using his methods. He said in a low voice, King. In the next second, his strength was directly raised to the level of an expert infinitely close to the low-level supreme will realm. Then, he immediately released his supreme sacred body with all his might to raise it to the highest level. A grade 3 supreme god realm supreme sacred body. It was enough for him to face the attack of a low-level supreme will realm expert head-on without suffering serious injuries. A calm expression appeared on Zhou Fight's face after using the supreme sacred body. With the supreme sacred body, even if he faced a high-level supreme will realm expert, he naturally could not fight. He at least had a certain level of confidence that he could escape. Following that, he formed a seal with both hands and chanted a spell. In the next second, a super-large boundless universe was directly formed, enveloping him and the martial emperor who was flying over. Is this the opening of a battlefield that belongs to you and me? Or the grave you've so carefully prepared? When the martial emperor saw this, he remained calm and unmoved. Swoosh! The martial emperor had already arrived in front of Zhou Fight and was about to punch him in the face. After this round, even ordinary low-level supreme will realm experts would probably have their heads blown apart if they did not defend. Zhou Fight reacted quickly and immediately blocked the punch with his hands. Then, he grabbed the other party's arm and threw the martial emperor in another direction with all his might. Unexpectedly, the martial emperor failed to control his divine body and was sent flying by Zhou Fight's force. A look of surprise flashed in his eyes. This common people's regal was indeed not simple. His strength was almost the same as his. He smiled gently. Interesting. Borrowing the force of the throw, he suddenly turned around and instantly attacked Zhou Fight. In the blink of an eye, he threw thousands of punches at Zhou Fight. Every punch was an all-out attack. If it was a low-level supreme will realm expert who was not good at close combat, his divine body would probably be shattered on the spot under the martial emperor's close combat attacks. However, Zhou Fight had an invincible supreme sacred body and was not afraid of the other party's continuous attacks at all. Not only did he not dodge, he even engaged in close combat with the other party. Bang 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 bang. Every punch hit the flesh. The entire super-large boundless universe echoed with the loud sound of the battle between the two. A moment later, the two gods suddenly punched each other with all their might, their fists aimed at each other's fists. Boom! Invisible ripples spread in all directions from the place where the two fists collided. Space obliteration. Time shattered. Billions of laws collapsed. Fortunately, the super-large boundless universe created by Zhou Fight was extremely sturdy. The damaged parts were quickly repaired. Otherwise, once the universe was damaged and the aftershocks of the battle were leaked, the Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom army outside the super-large boundless universe would suffer. Then, the two of them used the force of the feedback to jump to the side. Zhou Fight looked at him calmly. The martial emperor also looked at Zhou Fight with interest. Perfect martial arts. Not bad, not bad. For you to be able to reach the level of perfect martial arts at this age, you are indeed qualified to be the third reserve army of the Supreme Lord. I approve of you. However, such martial arts are still far inferior to mine. Next, I'll let you see more profound martial arts. My self-created martial arts. Imperial martial style martial arts. I'll tell you in advance. My martial arts have the potential to transcend. The real battle has just begun. Chapter 1758, Battle. Perfect martial arts? Zhou Fight was deep in thought after hearing the other party's words. Was he referring to the martial artist of heaven? I think so. Only martial arts mastered by heavenly martial artists could be called perfect martial arts. As for the martial emperor style he mentioned, it should be a martial art at the supreme will realm. What was the martial Dao at the supreme will realm? In other words, a martial art that surpassed the rules of cultivation and broke through the perfect confinement. Zhou Fai looked excited when he saw the martial emperor charging at him. He was not afraid at all. Instead, he rushed forward and fought with the other party. Bang, 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 bang. The loud sound of the collision resounded throughout the entire Great Thousand Universe. However, Zhou Fai was now at a complete disadvantage. It looked like he was no match for the martial emperor. The martial emperor was very arrogant at first. As he had expected, once he used his martial arts, this common people's regal had no way of retaliating. The martial emperor style. In other words, De Huang. Naturally, it lived up to its reputation. However, he quickly discovered something that displeased him. Under his continuous attacks, even though common people's regal had always been at a disadvantage, his physical defense was terrifyingly strong. He had been attacking until now, but he had actually not injured him at all. What kind of body is this? The martial emperor was about to vomit blood. His physical strength was almost comparable to a will-holy artifact, right? However, he soon discovered something that alarmed him. Under his continuous attacks, the common people's regal was actually unable to retaliate at first, but gradually began to be able to retaliate. The martial emperor sensitively sensed that common people's regal had extremely high potential for growth in his martial arts skills. If this continued, he might not even be able to fight him to a draw, much less suppress him. How could the martial emperor accept such a thing? He sent Zhou Fai flying with a punch. Then, he stood on the spot and looked at the other party with a solemn expression. Why aren't you fighting? Zhou Fai said in surprise. He looked unscathed. A smile gradually appeared on the martial emperor's face. The more you fight, the stronger you become. He said with a faint smile, so, you're a natural martial emperor like me. At this point, he shook his head again. What a pity, what a pity. If you don't focus on martial arts and dabble in too many laws, you won't be able to become a true martial emperor like me in the end. Today, I'll show you what a real martial emperor looks like. Ha! He clasped his hands together with his palms facing each other. His face was ferocious, and his muscles were bulging as though he was accumulating something. Seeing this, Zhou Fai threw a punch. However, after the punch landed on the martial emperor, he was actually unharmed. He didn't even move. The martial emperor sneered but didn't say anything. Zhou Fai narrowed his eyes as he watched this scene. With the martial arts knowledge of a heavenly martial artist, he could see the mystery of the other party's move. This move was a form of stance. This stance could release powerful moves by accumulating strength. Moreover, during the accumulation of power, the other party's physical defense would also reach an extremely high level. Ordinary external attacks would not be able to break through the other party's physical defense. He had relied on his physical strength to attack with all his might, but he was still unable to make the other party move after all. This proved this. He originally wanted to continue using some means to interrupt the other party's stance. He didn't stop him but after some thought. There were several reasons. First, the other party didn't use his full strength but he didn't do that either. Until now, he had only relied on the physical strength of the supreme sacred body to fight the other party. He had not even used the myriad method star palm. Not to mention the Yellow River Emperor Sword and the Yellow River Stone Slab, two willpower holy artifacts that could kill high-level Supreme Will Realm experts. Secondly, the innate martial emperor that the other party mentioned was the ability to become stronger the more he fought. He indeed had it. Firstly, it was because he was a heavenly martial artist and had an extremely high efficiency in learning all kinds of martial arts, and combat experience. He could grow rapidly in battle and even learn the other party's martial arts for his own use. The martial emperor thought that he was a heavenly martial artist, which was why he could keep getting stronger in battle. He could even threaten himself in the end. Now, he had no choice but to display even stronger strength. However, the martial emperor was wrong. He had the innate talent of a heavenly martial artist, so being able to quickly become stronger in battle was one thing. However, this reason alone would not allow him to grow so quickly in battle. The biggest reason was the myriad method star palm that he had mastered. The myriad method star palm itself had the ability to absorb the other party's laws in battle and perfect its growth. Moreover, the growth rate of this growth type ability far exceeded that of a heavenly martial artist. The reason why he did not want to interrupt the other party was because he wanted to use the myriad method star palm to replicate the other party's ability for his own use after the other party displayed an even stronger martial arts realm. His heart was burning. The martial emperor's ability was not inferior to the inheritance of a mid-level supreme will realm expert. Even though he had an incomplete eternal immortal realm inheritance like the supreme sacred body, the more supreme will realm inheritances he needed, the better. He wouldn't mind. So, let the martial emperor use his full strength. The stronger the other party was, the stronger he would be. The martial emperor was slightly taken aback before he smiled when he saw that Zhou Fight had no reaction to his accumulation of power. It was the smile of someone who had met a worthy opponent. As expected of a heavenly martial artist who had mastered perfect martial arts. When facing an opponent, he always yearned for the other party to display their strongest strength. Good. Then I'll defeat you with my full strength. I'll make you accept your death wholeheartedly. Roar! He roared as he suddenly grew 2 heads and 2 pairs of arms. This is my martial arts form 3 heads, 6 arms. Let me have a good fight with you. He looked at Zhou Fight with fighting spirit in his eyes. Zhou Fight's expression turned solemn. 3 heads, 6 arms. This ability looked very simple, but to a martial arts expert who grasped the supreme will realm, this simple 3 heads and 6 arms could increase the other party's strength by more than 10 times. However, he wasn't afraid. Instead, he became even more excited. If you want to fight, then fight. He rushed up and fought with the other party. The result was obvious. He was inferior to the martial emperor in terms of pure martial arts. Now that the other party had used 3 heads and 6 arms, his strength had increased by more than 10 times. He was at a disadvantage. Zhou Fight was at an absolute disadvantage. However, due to the supreme sacred body, even though Zhou Fight was constantly beaten up, he was not injured at all. Moreover, because his myriad method star palm was constantly absorbing his martial arts realm and increasing Zhou Fight's own martial arts realm, even though Zhou Fight was the one being abused, his eyes were actually becoming brighter and brighter. The martial emperor soon realized this. Swoosh! A pair of brass knuckles suddenly appeared on his 2 hands. A fist with brass knuckles hit Zhou Fight's chest. Zhou Fight felt a sharp pain in his chest. Frowning, he teleported out of the martial emperor's attack range and appeared in a safe spot. He looked down at his chest which had been smashed. However, in an instant, the powerful recovery ability of the supreme sacred body made this wound disappear without a trace, as if it had never been injured. Chapter 1759, Going All Out. The Power of Yellow River. If you continue to be beaten like this, I guarantee that you will die before you can recover. The martial emperor said indifferently with confidence. Zhou Fight didn't say anything. He just looked at his brass knuckles. It was a pair of dark golden ancient brass knuckles with faint blood stains on them, as if they had experienced many ancient massacres and witnessed the deaths of countless experts. It was a low-level will holy artifact. Since you've started using will holy artifacts, then I'll use some tricks. Zhou Fight's hands moved slightly. His hands and even his entire body emitted a faint white light. Myriad Method Star Palm. Even the Myriad Method Star Palm, which was only at the Grade 3 Supreme God Realm, had the power of a low-level Supreme Will Realm expert under the activation of the Supreme Sacred Body and the strength of an expert infinitely close to the low-level Supreme Will Realm. Previously, he had only used the Myriad Method Star Palm to learn how to absorb the other party's martial arts realm. He would be using it for battle now. Zhou Fight turned into a stream of light and appeared in front of the martial emperor, punching him. Boom! Space shattered. Time was obliterated. Laws collapsed. The martial emperor's expression changed slightly. This power! He immediately punched back. The 2 fists collided, creating a huge destructive aftershock. Zhou Fight was forced back hundreds of light years by the force of the collision. It was the same for the martial emperor. After the 2 stopped retreating, they immediately charged at each other again. Bang 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 bang. The 2 sides started fighting again, starting the second round of intense battles. While the martial emperor's martial arts realm was very high and he could crush Zhou Fight in terms of martial arts realm, after Zhou Fight used the Myriad Method Star Palm, he no longer used pure martial arts to deal with the martial emperor. Thousands of laws were at his fingertips. Endless laws followed with every move. At this moment, he was like a heavenly Dao De Huang who ruled over all techniques. Even though the martial emperor was a true supreme will realm expert, he couldn't do anything against Zhou Fight's sacred body that was comparable to a low-level will holy artifact and endless nomological methods. The two sides continued to fight and fell into a protracted battle. This was a standard battle between law and martial. Interesting. The martial emperor licked his lips, his expression ferocious and excited. It had been a long time since he had encountered such an interesting opponent. He took a light breath as a glint flashed across his eyes. Suddenly, an invisible blood-colored armor and 4 other will holy artifacts appeared out of thin air and attached themselves to his divine body and 4 other arms. The fully armed martial emperor's aura surged again, far exceeding the level of a low-level supreme will realm expert. When Zhou Fight saw this, his expression turned solemn for the first time. Mid-level supreme will realm. After this martial emperor put on his will holy artifact, he shockingly raised his strength to another level, reaching the level of a mid-level supreme will realm expert. Yes. Looking at the martial emperor's equipment, Zhou Fight could tell that they were all will holy artifacts. Even though they were all low-level will holy artifacts, it was enough to increase the strength of this expert by a level after they were worn by an expert. I'm afraid that he has once killed a mid-level supreme will realm expert with this will holy artifact. Looking at the murderous aura on the martial emperor's will holy artifact, Zhou Fight thought grimly. If he didn't have the Yellow River Emperor sword and the fragment of the illusionary legendary tier sacred seal that contained unfathomable power, he would probably have run as far as he could when he saw the martial emperor in this state. However, he, who had the Yellow River Emperor sword and the fragment of the illusionary legendary tier sacred seal, still had the courage to fight the other party. Common people's regal. The martial emperor pointed his spear at Zhou Fight and said coldly, "You should be proud of yourself for being able to make this divine being go all out even though you're about to die. A grade 3 supreme god realm can make me do this. I am willing to call you the strongest among the supreme gods." Zhou Fight's expression was calm. "What is this?" He stretched out his right hand and saw a faint yellow ancient stone slab appear on his right hand, floating quietly. It is the Yellow River stone slab. When the martial emperor saw the Yellow River stone slab, his pupils constricted slightly, and he was deeply surprised and shocked. That was a high-level will holy artifact. This Supreme Lord Reserve Army, who was only at the grade 3 Supreme God realm, actually had a superior will holy artifact. He suddenly felt jealous. That was a high-level will holy artifact. He might have a set of low-level will holy artifacts that were suitable for him. However, in terms of value, his entire set of low-level will holy artifacts was probably inferior to the superior will holy artifact in Zhou Fight's hands. Low-level. High-level. The difference of one word represented a huge difference that could be said to be like the difference between the heavens and the earth. A mere grade 3 supreme god realm could actually possess such a precious willpower holy artifact. Damn it! The supreme will actually favors this little guy so much? Good, good, good. Since that is the case, I'll personally make him perish in my hands. Not only would he lose the face of the supreme will, his treasures, inheritance, and that mysterious will holy artifact would all be mine. The fighting spirit in his eyes intensified at the thought of this. When Zhou Fight saw the other party's shocked and jealous gaze, he thought of something. When the will of the Yellow River perished, it seemed that it did not carry the 2 superior will holy artifacts, the Yellow River Emperor sword and the Yellow River stone slab with it. Instead, it left them in a nourishing place in the Yellow River domain and placed them there to nourish them. This way, when they were used in battle in the future, they could unleash even stronger power. However, the Yellow River will did not expect that the Illusionist clan would launch a sneak attack on his hometown in the Yellow River region and send several Supreme Will Realm experts to kill him immediately. The sudden encirclement caused Yellow River's will to die in its territory before it could prepare. Otherwise, if the will of the Yellow River was prepared and carried the 2 will holy artifacts, the Yellow River stone slab and the Yellow River Emperor sword, the encirclement of the illusionary race would definitely not succeed, and he would definitely not die. Teacher Yellow River. I will kill all the Supreme Will Realm experts in the Yellow River realm to avenge you. Zhou Fight thought to himself. The Supreme Will Realm expert, the Death Whisperer, had already died. The second was the Martial Emperor in front of him. The power of Yellow River. Zhou Fight suddenly said softly. The Yellow River stone slab floating in his right hand suddenly emitted a rich yellow light. This faint yellow light was like the faint yellow clouds of the Yellow River that had lasted for countless years. It made one feel loneliness, death, darkness, and utter despair. The light from the Yellow River slate did not affect anyone else, but when it landed on Zhou Fight's body, it was like a buff, causing Zhou Fight's combat strength to increase by 5 times. Zhou Fight could not help but take a deep breath as a faint smile appeared on his lips, feeling his own strength. The current he could beat him from before. Is this the power of the Yellow River? He muttered to himself. Then, his eyes suddenly shot out a shocking light as he looked straight at the Martial Emperor. The Martial Emperor narrowed his eyes. He felt that Zhou Fight was different. Haha. So what? The outcome is not going to change. Chapter 1760, The Martial Emperor Fell. 1. Zhou Fight turned into a faint yellow stream of light and rushed forward, punching the Martial Emperor. The Martial Emperor's 6 arms moved at the same time, turning into countless fist shadows that attacked Zhou Fight. Bang! The Martial Emperor was sent flying by Zhou Fight's punch and his face was severely injured. He recovered instantly. Zhou Fight was unharmed even though he was also sent flying. Hee. The Martial Emperor touched his face and sneered. This battle is getting more and more interesting. Swoosh! He charged at Zhou Fight again and fought him. Bang! 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 Clang! Boom! The Martial Emperor's 6 arms held 6 will holy artifacts. The frequency at which he attacked Zhou Fight was extremely shocking. Every move and style released an incomparably terrifying destructive power that was enough to destroy hundreds of boundless universes. Even though Zhou Fight did not transform into 6 arms, he was able to contend against him with his invincible body and a pair of fists. Even though the Martial Emperor's 6 will holy artifacts had put Zhou Fight at a disadvantage, it looked like every moment of the battle was very dangerous. However, Zhou Fight was at most injured and did not die. Willpower skill 6 Sacred Demons. Seeing this, the Martial Emperor suddenly used his will technique. A terrifying heavenly demon Dharmaloksana appeared behind him, and the pressure and offensive pressure on him increased exponentially again. Zhou Fight was instantly covered in injuries. These injuries ranged from light to heavy, making Zhou Fight look extremely miserable. Even though they could instantly repair the supreme sacred body, a large number of new injuries would cover his sacred body in the next second. Seeing this, Zhou Fight chose to crazily exchange injuries for injuries, allowing the Martial Emperor to relax the frequency of his attacks a little. Then, he seized the opportunity to kick the Martial Emperor away. When the Martial Emperor counterattacked, a sword suddenly appeared in his hand. Xian Yuan Divine Sword. As a growth-type race divine artifact, the Xian Yuan Divine Sword had also advanced to the low-level Will Holy Artifact level when Zhou Fight's strength had already reached the low-level Supreme Will realm. Ordinary race divine artifacts definitely did not have such high growth potential. However, the Xian Yuan Divine Sword could. The reason for this was not only because the quality of the Xian Yuan Divine Sword was extremely high, but also because his master, Zhou Zhou, was a person of great luck. Race divine artifacts were born based on the luck of the race. As the patriarch of the human race, Zhou Fight was the person with the highest luck of the race. Under the influence of Zhou Zhou's luck, the upper limit of the Xian Yuan Divine Sword became extremely high. Now, the upper limit of the Xian Yuan Divine Sword's divine artifact had even barely reached the level of will transcendence. Which meant, even if Zhou Fight raised his strength to the level of willpower transcendence, the Xian Yuan Divine Sword could still raise his grade to the level of willpower transcendence. Speaking of which, after Zhou Fight took out the Xian Yuan Divine Sword, he immediately rushed towards the Martial Emperor and fought with him. Even though the Martial Emperor had 6 will holy artifacts in his possession, he could only barely suppress and injure Zhou Fight, who was also in possession of a will holy artifact. He could not really kill Zhou Fight. Moreover, as the duration of the battle increased, the Martial Emperor could clearly sense that Zhou Fight's martial arts realm was constantly improving. He was already constantly approaching the level of the Supreme Will realm. The Martial Emperor had to admit one thing. Zhou Fight's martial arts talent seemed to be stronger than his. He thought quickly and forced Zhou Fight to retreat. Then, he stood on the spot and looked at him coldly. He then pointed at him. Martial Emperor. Buzz. Zhou Fight frowned slightly. He had a vague feeling that some of the things he had seemed to have been duplicated by the other party. This is your nomological skill, the myriad method star palm. With the thought, the Martial Emperor's entire body emitted a faint white light. He felt the power surging out of his body, and his eyes were filled with shock. Then, he thought of something and suddenly laughed in ecstasy. Okay. What a great myriad method star palm. Even though this law skill is young, it has the will to transcend. He suddenly looked at Zhou Fight and grinned. Thank you for the myriad method star palm. With your myriad method star palm, I have an additional 10% chance of advancing to a willpower expert in the future. Zhou Fight nodded calmly and suddenly asked, is that all? The martial emperor was stunned. What do you mean? What I mean is... So much for your conceptual godly powers. Zhou Fight said coldly. Normally speaking, if the other party's conceptual god power was to replicate the other party's martial arts ability, he should be able to replicate his supreme sacred body. However, the other party clearly did not duplicate it. The reason was obvious. The martial emperor was just a low-level expert. As for Zhou Fight's supreme sacred body, it was an eternal immortal realm inheritance. The difference between the two was too great. It was too normal that the conceptual divine power of the martial emperor could not be replicated. At this moment, the martial emperor attacked again. Zhou Fight was also forced to fight with the other party. With the myriad method star palm in hand, the martial emperor's strength had clearly increased greatly. Moreover, this was the grade 3 supreme god realm myriad method star palm. He did not dare to imagine that if it was the low-level supreme will realm myriad method star palm, Zhou Fight would probably have already started to think of an escape route. However, it was precisely because it was not a high-level myriad method star palm that even though Zhou Fight seemed to be in danger under the martial emperor's attack, there had never been any major problems. Chapter 1761, The Martial Emperor Died. 2. On the contrary, in such a high-pressure battle, Zhou Fight's martial arts realm had been increasing rapidly with the help of the myriad method star palm and the heaven martial artist. He was almost at the edge of the supreme will realm. The martial emperor also noticed this. His expression remained unchanged on the surface, but his heart turned gloomy. This Supreme Lord's Third Reserve Army. It was actually so difficult to deal with? With his current strength, not to mention dealing with a middle-stage Supreme Will Realm expert, he could even fight an upper-stage Supreme Will Realm expert. However, he actually failed to kill the other party and instead made the other party become stronger and stronger under his watch? This was the greatest mockery of him. This guy's true strength is not far off even if he not an upper-stage Supreme Will Realm expert. The martial emperor cursed inwardly. At the same time, he was extremely jealous and afraid. This common people's regal was actually so abnormal. He was only a grade 3 Supreme God Realm expert, but he was already almost not weaker than a high-level Supreme Will Realm expert. If he advanced to the Supreme Will Realm in the future, what would happen? At the thought of this, an extremely strong killing intent suddenly arose in his heart. The Third Reserve Army of the Supreme Lord must die. His existence would definitely bring great resistance to them conquering the Supreme Great Cosmos and even the ultimate Void Cosmos in the future. He had to kill him before he fully matured. Even if he had to pay a huge price. At the thought of this, he punched Zhou Fight to the side again, allowing him to retreat from the battlefield. Then, he looked at Zhou Fight and took a deep breath. He then clenched his fist and exerted all his strength. His body emitted a faint golden glow. When Zhou Fight saw this scene, he raised his eyebrows slightly. This was, activating the origin power of his will? Even among Supreme Will Realm experts, this move was considered a desperate move. It was not used in life and death battles. He became vigilant. At this moment, the martial emperor suddenly crossed his arms and retracted his right fist. Then, he widened his eyes and punched Zhou Fight with all his might. The strongest martial art martial emperor fist. It was a simple and unadorned will technique. However, it represented the martial emperor's highest achievement on the path of martial arts, condensing all of his comprehension and killing intent on the path of martial arts. After throwing that punch, the martial emperor panted heavily as if he was exhausted. The light around his body and eyes disappeared. Even his strength had fallen back to the low-level Supreme Will realm. The holy artifacts in his body were also unusable. They turned into 12 streams of light and flew into his inner world to be nurtured again. At this moment, the martial emperor really wanted to rest, because he could sense that he had already lost half of his body's origin. Under such circumstances, he had to rest well to replenish it. Otherwise, his strength would permanently decrease. At this moment, the martial emperor really wanted to rest, because he could sense that he had already lost half of his body's origin. Under such circumstances, he had to rest well to replenish it. Otherwise, his strength would permanently decrease. However, he didn't want to rest, much less rest. He wanted to witness the death of the Third Reserve Army of the Supreme Lord. As long as this fellow perished, he believed that the Great Grand Supreme Elder would reward him tenfold or 100-fold for everything he had lost. At this moment, Zhou Fight looked at the huge fist that was flying towards him with a solemn expression. This punch was already not inferior to the attack of a high-level Supreme Will Realm expert. It would probably be difficult to deal with this punch with the strength he used. However, Zhou Fight remained calm. He had a thought. A black cloak appeared in front of him. Then, the black cloak expanded with the wind and quickly became as big as the boundless universe. The martial emperor's fist kept charging into the black cloak. Then, the black cloak shook and expanded as if it was filled. However, after a while, the black cloak returned to normal, as if nothing had happened. What? The martial emperor looked at this scene in disbelief. His full-powered attack had actually disappeared without injuring Zhou Fight at all? What kind of joke was this? He stared at the black cloak and quickly came to a conclusion. However, this conclusion didn't convince him. Instead, it made he even more indignant and jealous. Another high-level Will Holy artifact. And it's an extremely rare defensive superior Will Holy artifact. The martial emperor gritted his teeth and looked at Zhou Fight indignantly. Just how much was this little fellow favored by the Supreme Will? This was only a grade 3 Supreme God realm, and he already had 2 superior Will Holy artifacts. Such a luxurious holy artifact configuration was extremely rare even among many Supreme Will realm experts. Not to mention a mere grade 3 Supreme God realm? A grade 3 Supreme God realm would not only have a superior Will Holy artifact. He was not even worthy of a glance. How could he have 2? Wasn't he afraid that the God King Heaven Punishment and the Spring Autumn Dharma Lord would be jealous? When God King Heaven Punishment and Spring Autumn Dharma Lord were supreme gods, they only had 1 Will Holy artifact, and it was only a low-level Will Holy artifact. How could it be as ridiculous as him, who now had 2 superior Will Holy artifacts? He looked at Zhou Fight and realized that Zhou Fight was also looking at him coldly. Do you have any other tricks? Use it. Let this emperor take a look. Zhou Fight said condescendingly. He. As a martial emperor, I won't be easily defeated by a brat like you. The martial emperor said with a ferocious expression. Then, he suddenly grabbed his chest with his right hand. Bang! He actually tore through his chest and tore it apart, tearing his heart out of his body. Zhou Fight raised his eyebrows. Supreme Will Realm experts had already completely escaped the restraints of the rules. Even their bodies were formed by the power of will. Therefore, no rule-level method could injure a Supreme Will Realm expert. Only the power of will could injure a Supreme Will Realm expert. Zhou Fight could also rely on his supreme sacred body and the power of the Yellow River to injure such an existence. The heart was also the absolute hub of the supreme willpower body. With his heart destroyed, even a Supreme Will Realm expert could not survive. From the looks of it, the martial emperor was going all out. That was indeed the case. After the martial emperor took out his heart, his aura weakened again and even went straight to the Supreme God level. Soon, he would fall from the Supreme Will Realm to the Supreme God level. However, the martial emperor didn't care at all. He took a look at his heart and then looked at Zhou Fight with a ferocious smile. Even if I die here today, I want you to die with me. Zhou Fight said calmly, your death will establish the supreme prestige of the common people's regal. From his words, he didn't think that the other party could kill him at all. The martial emperor smiled sinisterly and did something shocking. He actually ate his heart in one bite. In the next second, the martial emperor's aura suddenly soared. In the blink of an eye, it rose to the mid-level Supreme Will Realm, and then to the high-level Supreme Will Realm. I see. Devour your own heart and unleash your last bit of potential. Zhou Fight nodded. You're going to die. Perhaps it was because of the last moments of life. The martial emperor's expression was quite calm at this moment. It was impossible to tell that he was a Supreme Will Realm expert who was about to die. Zhou Fight shook his head. No. Yes, you're dying. Zhou Fight slowly took out the 3rd Will Holy artifact from his number 1 treasure vault after saying that. It was a Supreme Holy Sword that emitted the aura of the Yellow River. Superior Will Holy artifact Yellow River Thearch Sword. The martial emperor's pupils contracted. In the next second, Zhou Fight instantly disappeared and appeared in front of the martial emperor. The Yellow River Emperor sword in his hand slashed hundreds of times, and in the blink of an eye, the martial emperor was reduced to dust. I can't accept this. Why do you have 3 Will Holy artifacts? The martial emperor's indignant voice sounded. Wrong. 4. Zhou Fight took out his 4th superior Will Holy artifact, which was the last Will Holy artifact of the Death Whisperer, the Death Scepter. You haven't forced this emperor to use this fourth will holy artifact. With that, he slowly put away all the willpower holy artifacts. At the same time, the martial emperor's corpse in front of him also slowly disappeared, turning into a large number of spoils of war that floated in front of Zhou Fight. The martial emperor was dead. Chapter 1762, Shock of the Reincarnation Will. 1. Zhou Fight looked at the loots in front of him and could not help but heave a sigh of relief. What a tough guy. He sighed. This was the first time he had to use all means to barely defeat the other party. Such a situation was very rare for the current him. However, as a low-level Supreme Will Realm expert, the martial emperor could actually unleash an attack comparable to a high-level Supreme Will Realm expert on his deathbed. Under such circumstances, Zhou Fight was able to kill him. If news of this were to spread, it would be enough to spread throughout the myriad worlds and make Zhou Fight the most famous existence. No, even the Crimson Great Cosmos, the Ultimate Void Cosmos, and even the Illusionary Great Cosmos would probably be shocked speechless after hearing his achievements. In the end, he was only a Grade 3 Supreme God Realm after all. However, he could erupt with the combat strength of a high-level Supreme Will Realm expert. Even with the help of the Will Holy Artifact, it was enough to make many Supreme Will Realm experts not dare to underestimate it. Then, he sensed his divine body and couldn't help but shake his head. The battle just now had actually exhausted all the divine power and willpower in his body. And this was under the condition that he had used the king. There was no need to talk about divine power. In terms of willpower, the willpower required by these three will holy artifacts was indeed terrifying. Then, he took out a large number of Supreme God-level divine herbs and stuffed them into his mouth to replenish his state as he put away the martial emperor's spoils of war in front of him. The martial emperor's spoils of war could be said to be vast. They were enough to fill more than half of the boundless universe. However, most of these loots were the spoils of war of the supreme gods and below. They were born after the heavenly fate De Huang quadrupled. Zhou Fight was no longer interested in these supreme god-level spoils of war. He directly looked at the spoils of war at the Supreme Will Realm. When he took out all the Supreme Will Realm loots and checked them individually, a faint smile appeared on his face. This guy has quite a number of willpower holy artifacts. He smiled. This guy had a total of 11 low-level will holy artifacts. In addition, among the spoils of war that he had dropped were 5 other will holy artifacts. However, these 5 will holy artifacts were not suitable for martial arts experts. The martial emperor must have known this too, so he kept it in his storage space as a collectible. However, what made Zhou Fight feel a little regretful was that his current Lord Talent, Heavenly Fate De Huang, was only a Supreme God-level Lord Talent, not a Supreme Will Realm Lord Talent. Otherwise, he wouldn't have dropped 16 will holy artifacts. He was going to drop a total of 64 will holy artifacts. However, he did not think too much about it. Now, he no longer lacked will holy artifacts, so even though he felt a little regretful, he didn't pay much attention to it. Speaking of which, apart from top-notch loots like the will holy artifact, in addition, there were a total of 121 other Supreme Will Realm treasures. It included offensive, defensive, cultivation, materials, medicine, secret treasures, and other aspects. Even though they were at most mid-level Supreme Will Realm treasures and did not have any high-level Supreme Will Realm treasures. However, Zhou Fight was already very satisfied. There are 32 combat-type Supreme Will Realm treasures among them. It can be rewarded to my subordinates as a trump card for them to protect themselves. Zhou Fight thought to himself. With the help of the 4 will holy artifacts, he already had the combat power of an upper-level Supreme Will Realm expert. Naturally, he would not be interested in such a mediocre mid-level and low-level treasure. However, these treasures were extremely important to his subordinates. They did not have any treasures at the Supreme Will Realm after all. However, they needed to follow him to battle and even begin to fight enemies at the Supreme Will Realm. Without a treasure at the Supreme Will Realm to protect them, they might not even be able to see the enemy before they were killed by the aftershocks of the battle between he and the enemy at the Supreme Will Realm. That wasn't the outcome he wanted to see. Then, he looked at the willpower holy artifact in his number 1 treasure vault and suddenly sighed. He already had so many will holy artifacts in his hands. Even though there are many will holy artifacts that I have no use for. But in the future, I can find an opportunity to make a deal with the Supreme Will. The Supreme Will probably like these will holy artifacts. Zhou Fight smiled. Then, with a thought, he saw the world he had specially opened up for battle gradually fade away. Finally, it completely dissipated in the air, revealing the scene outside. Then, he raised his brows. Because he saw that his army was actually fighting the army of the illusionary race. The army of the illusionary race was the army of the beginner grade master god tier kingdom. At this moment, the two sides were in a fierce battle. The army of the blazing sun divine kingdom did not have the protection of Zhou Fight's land of earth, a minister of the king's domain. Therefore, in the face of the conceptual divine power of the illusionist clan, even though they were far superior in terms of military strength, they were still at a disadvantage. When Zhou Fight saw this, he immediately activated the land of earth, a minister of the king's law skill. The moment the domain spread out, the army of the blazing sun divine kingdom immediately changed from being suppressed to counter-attacking. This scene was also seen by the commanders of both sides. Bai Yun and the other generals were naturally pleasantly surprised. His Majesty could actually return safely after fighting that Supreme Will Realm expert. Chapter 1763, Shock of the Reincarnation Will. 2. However, what about Supreme Will Realm experts? They were puzzled. At the same time, when God Lord East Heaven saw that Zhou Fight was unharmed, he did not have time to think about why Zhou Fight did not die at the hands of the Martial Emperor. Instead, he immediately searched for the Martial Emperor. In the end, he couldn't find the Martial Emperor even after looking for a long time. He could not help but be stunned. He had seen with his own eyes that Zhou Fight had used the method to create a universe to send him and the Martial Emperor into a universe to fight. Now that Zhou Fight was out, where was the Martial Emperor? Thinking of a possibility, he couldn't help but tremble. Could the Martial Emperor be dead? The more he thought about it, the more likely it seemed. He knew that before the Martial Emperor, the Death Whisperer, as a powerful Supreme Will Realm expert, had also died at Zhou Fight's hands. Putting aside whether Zhou Fight killed him personally or was killed by the illusionary legendary tier Sage Seal. This already proved that Zhou Fight had the strength to kill a Supreme Will Realm expert. Now that the Martial Emperor had been killed by the other party, it wasn't impossible. At the thought of this, Dong Tian's heart instantly turned ice cold, as if it had sunk to the bottom of the valley. He couldn't help but go crazy. Before the Martial Emperor went to look for Zhou Fight, he had already reminded him repeatedly and emphasized that he could not underestimate Zhou Fight. How did the Martial Emperor die in the end? Including the Martial Emperor, there were already 2 Supreme Will Realm experts who had died in the hands of a Grade 3 Supreme God Realm expert like Zhou Fight. If word of this got out, their Illusionist clan would lose a lot of face. No. This matter would definitely spread. The Supreme Will, would not conceal such an existence. The Illusionist clan were going to lose face this time. What do I do? What should I do now? He carefully looked at Zhou Fight as he racked his brains to think of a solution. The Martial Emperor was most likely dead. He had already died. What could a small quasi-Supreme Will Realm expert like him do? They could either wait for death or escape. As for surrendering? Dong Tian didn't even think about it. Among the Illusionist clan, there was a Supreme Will Realm powerhouse of the Illusionist clan who had mastered the conceptual god of fate. His conceptual god power was called Death of Fate. It was said that his conceptual divine ability could allow him to see the fate of all the Illusionist clan. Furthermore, if he wanted to kill any Illusionist clan, he only needed to cut off the other party's fate to kill them. Moreover, he could ignore the difference in strength. It was rumored that when the other party was first born, he relied on this conceptual god ability to directly kill a grade 4 supreme god expert at that time. At that time, the other party was only a true god tier elementary grade. A true god tier elementary grade killed a grade 4 supreme god. Even Zhou Zhou could not do it. However, the other party did it as a member of the conceptual god system. Now that the other party had become a Supreme Will Realm expert, it was no exaggeration to say that he could easily kill a Supreme Will Realm expert of the Illusionist clan of the same level. If he surrendered to Zhou Fight and this news spread to the Illusionist clan, he would commit suicide in less than 2 days. Most importantly, neither the Ultimate Void Great Cosmos nor the Illusionary Realm took prisoners. Unless the other party had completely transformed into a living being of the Ultimate Void Great Cosmos or an illusionary legendary tier monster of the illusionary race. Other than that, there was no other example. Run! When Dong Tian thought of this, he turned around and fled, as if he had made a decision. Trying to run. At this moment, a faint voice sounded in his mind. Then, his eyes suddenly darkened. East Heaven had fallen. Zhou Fight retracted his gaze. It was just killing a quasi-supreme will realm illusionist clan. To him, it was like killing chickens and dogs. Then, he personally joined the war and quickly wiped out the illusionary army. Organize the army and revive the soldiers. Then, return to the spaceship and head straight for the divine capital of the East Heaven Divine Kingdom. In half an hour, this emperor wants this land to belong to the Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom. Zhou Fight ordered. Yes. The army roared and obeyed. Seeing this, Zhou Fight was about to return to his Grade 4 Supreme God Cosmic Battleship. At this moment, a figure suddenly appeared in front of him. He looked anxious, but when he saw that Zhou Fight was safe and sound and that the Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom army was fine, he was stunned for a moment before a smile appeared on his face. I knew my brother would be fine. The reincarnation will smiled. I've made you worry. Zhou Fight smiled. The reincarnation will smiled and shook his head. Even though I came here for nothing, as long as you are fine. By the way, where is the martial emperor? The reincarnation will asked. At the same time, he sensed his surroundings. There was the aura of the martial emperor, but why wasn't he here now? Zhou Fight chuckled. The martial emperor has already died in my hands. You used the illusionary legendary Tear Sage seal. The reincarnation will was stunned before coming to a realization. Zhou Fight shook his head. The martial emperor died before I could use it. In fact, he didn't know how to use it either. The last time the illusionary legendary Tear Sage seal killed the Death Whisperer was completely a spontaneous act of the illusionary legendary Tear Sage seal. At that time, Zhou Fight did not even know what had happened before the Death Whisperer fell. Therefore, Zhou Fight had never regarded the legendary Tear Sacred Seal as his trump card against the Illusionist clan. Speaking of which, previously, he had always felt that his strength could at most deal with a low-level Supreme Will Realm expert. Now that he had experienced a true Supreme Will Realm battle, this upper limit could be greatly increased. It could barely be considered the combat strength of a high-level Supreme Will Realm expert. Zhou Fight thought to himself. Reincarnation Will was stunned when he heard Zhou Fight's words. He had an unbelievable thought. Is this brother of his telling the truth? He could kill a Supreme Will Realm expert without relying on the illusionary legendary Tear Sage seal? Moreover, it was a Supreme Will Realm expert like the Martial Emperor? He had long heard of the Martial Emperor's name from the Supreme Will. The Supreme Will had once said that the Martial Emperor's strength could not be underestimated. Even though he was at the low-level Supreme Will realm, if the other party used all his strength, it was enough to exchange 2 moves with a high-level Supreme Will realm expert. If the Martial Emperor was given enough and suitable opponents, he could be promoted to a willpower expert in the future. For this reason, the Supreme Will had specially instructed them, who were experts in martial arts among the Supreme Will realm, not to get close to the Martial Emperor, lest their martial arts realms became food for the other party's growth. However, he did not expect that such an expert would actually be dealt with by his younger brother. He suddenly laughed out loud after being stunned for a moment. Brother, as expected of you. The reincarnation will gave a thumbs up. A Grade 3 Supreme God Realm killed a Supreme Will Realm expert. Even God King Heaven Punishment and the Spring Autumn Dharma Lord have never achieved such results. When did they kill the first Supreme Will Realm expert? Zhou Fight asked curiously. The reincarnation Will smiled and said, when God King Heaven Punishment was at the quasi-Supreme Will Realm, he killed a low-level Supreme Will Realm expert. The Spring Autumn Dharma Lord killed a low-level Supreme Will Realm expert when he was a Grade 4 Supreme God. Zhou Fight was shocked. He knew how he had killed the Martial Emperor. He had relied on the legacy of the Eternal Immortal Realm, the Supreme Sacred Body and 3 Superior Will Holy Artifacts to kill the Martial Emperor. He had such an opportunity, yet it was so difficult to kill him. How did God King Heaven Punishment and Spring Autumn Dharma Lord do it? Could it be that they had similar opportunities as him? Especially since the Spring Autumn Dharma Lord could actually kill a Supreme Will Realm expert when he was a Grade 4 Supreme God. However, in this aspect, he was even stronger than the number 1 successor, God King Heaven Punishment. The reincarnation Will could tell what he was thinking from Zhou Fight's expression. He smiled and said, don't think that Spring Autumn Dharma Lord is stronger than God King Heaven Punishment. The reason why the Spring Autumn Dharma Lord was able to kill a Supreme Will Realm expert when he was a Grade 4 Supreme God was because he controlled the River of Time, allowing him to summon his future self from the River of Time. Back then, he summoned 2 future bodies at the low-level Supreme Will Realm to kill that low-level Supreme Will Realm expert. As for God King Heaven Punishment, The reincarnation will took a deep breath, and the blinding light in his eyes shone brightly. He said, back then, he relied on nothing but himself to kill a low-level Supreme Will Realm expert. Zhou Fight was dumbfounded. Chapter 1764, The Supreme Will Shock. 1. Zhou Fight was dumbfounded for a while before he gradually calmed down. He could actually kill a low-level Supreme Will Realm expert without relying on any external items? This is simply too heaven-defying. It was as though he had also relied on the 3 will holy artifacts to do so. What right did the other party have? Could the God King Heaven Punishment have a complete set of Eternal Realm expert inheritances? Otherwise, Zhou Fight could not imagine how the other party could kill a Supreme Will Realm expert by himself. How did he do it? Zhou Fight could not help but ask. I don't know either, but the battle results can't be faked. This is something that the Supreme Will personally witnessed and acknowledged. The reincarnation will shook his head. However, he thought of something and revealed a mysterious expression. According to rumors, the God King Heaven Punishment has the mysterious inheritance of a powerhouse. The inheritance of that powerhouse is very likely not inferior to the Supreme Will, or even. The reincarnation will did not finish his sentence. However, Zhou Fight had also guessed it. As expected, everyone guessed that God King Heaven Punishment had a suspected Eternal Immortal Realm inheritance. Even experts at the Supreme Will Realm or even the Willpower Realm would be envious of such an inheritance. The God King Heaven Punishment would have been killed long ago if not for the protection of the Supreme Will. How could he have grown to this day? Don't underestimate yourself. When Reincarnation Will saw the shocked expression on Zhou Fight's face, he patted Zhou Fight's shoulder and laughed. The Heaven-punishing Divine King is indeed invincible. However, you're not inferior to him at all. In fact, everyone will think that you're stronger when news of you spreads. You're a grade 3 Supreme God Realm expert after all. You're not even a grade 4 Supreme God, yet you can kill a Supreme Will Realm expert. Secondly, the Supreme Will Realm expert you killed is a top-notch expert like the Martial Emperor who is comparable to a high-level Supreme Will Realm expert. You really made me jump. It's fine if you're not famous, but you're doing such a huge thing once you get famous. That's an enemy with high-level Supreme Will Realm battle benefits. Even I can't guarantee a 100% win against an expert of that level. You're gonna be famous. From today onwards, no powerhouse in the myriad worlds, including existences like the Supreme Will and the Crimson Overlord, will treat you as a junior. Instead, they will treat you as a top powerhouse worthy of respect and recognition. You're already worthy of the respect of any powerhouse. Reincarnation Will was greatly comforted. The stronger the common people's regal, the happier he would be. After all, the common people's regal was also someone he valued. The stronger he was, the more it proved that his judgment was right. The Supreme Will Realm experts and even the Supreme Will Realm experts already knew that he admired the common people's regal. If this matter were to spread, he would be even more proud. What are your plans next? Do you want to come with me to find trouble with those Supreme Will Realm experts? The Reincarnation Will asked. He had already completely treated Zhou Fight as an expert on the same level as him. Therefore, he wanted him to help him. He was also under pressure when facing those Supreme Will Realm experts after all. Is there trouble on my brother's side? Zhou Fight asked curiously. By now, he had figured out some of his elder brother's background. If he could resolve something within his abilities, he would definitely not ask anyone else for help. Now that he had taken the initiative to speak, it only proved that the matter had reached a point that he couldn't resolve personally. Reincarnation Will nodded solemnly. The battlefield over there is indeed a little troublesome. After the Death Reincarnator died, the highest authority of the Illusionist clan in the Yellow River region fell to a low-level Supreme Will Realm expert called the Hermit. That guy and another low-level Supreme Will Realm expert, the Master of Stasis, guarded the Yellow River region together. I could have easily dealt with these 2 low-level Supreme Will Realm enemies. However, just this morning, that guy actually attracted 5 Supreme Will Realm experts from the Land of Dusk. Among them, there were even 2 high-level Supreme Will Realm experts, 2 mid-level Supreme Will Realm experts, and a low-level Supreme Will Realm expert. At this point, the Reincarnation Will's expression darkened. He said speechlessly, I can easily deal with 2 low-level Supreme Will Realm experts. However, I can't resolve 7 Supreme Will Realm experts, including 2 high-level Supreme Will Realm experts. The Reincarnation Will frankly stated the fact that he could not defeat it. Zhou Fight was not surprised. According to what he knew, the reincarnation will was only a low-level Supreme Will Realm expert. It was already very shocking that it could resist the pressure of 7 Supreme Will Realm experts. Has the Supreme Will come to help? Zhou Fight asked. The Supreme Will said that he has already sent 3 high-level Supreme Will Realm experts over. However, for some reason, he hasn't come over yet. I'm worried that something might have happened. The Reincarnation Will said solemnly. Zhou Fight nodded. The Reincarnation Will was not someone who would leave others in the lurch. The high-level Supreme Will Realm experts he had sent must have encountered something. An illusory figure appeared in front of them. The two of them were stunned. Then, they hurriedly said respectfully. Greetings, Supreme Will. You're right. The Supreme Will said, the 3 high-level Supreme Will Realm experts I sent were stopped by the illusionary race. It will take at least 3 days to come over. Chapter 1765, The Supreme Will Shock. 2. You have to hold on for 3 days before they can come over. I can't do anything. Otherwise, the willpower experts of the illusionary world will also attack. At that time, the Yellow River Realm might be destroyed. Zhou Fight and Reincarnation Will nodded. It was not their first time experiencing such unspoken rules of war, so they naturally understood the High Will's difficulties. 3 days. Zhou Fight and the Reincarnation Will looked at each other and said in unison, Lord Supreme Will, don't worry. We will definitely hold on until reinforcements arrive. The Supreme Will smiled and nodded. Reincarnation Will also smiled and said, if it was before, I wouldn't be so confident. Reincarnation Will also smiled and said, if it was before, I wouldn't be so confident. The Supreme Will looked at Zhou Fight in surprise. Did your strength increase again? He had not paid attention to the Yellow River Realm these few days, so he did not know that Zhou Fight already had the combat strength of a Supreme Will Realm expert. Before Zhou Fight could say anything, the Reincarnation Will told the Supreme Will everything. The Supreme Will was also stunned when he knew that Zhou Fight had actually killed Invincible by himself. Then, he smiled. Seeing this smile, the Reincarnation Will secretly clicked his tongue and was excited. He had followed the Supreme Will for so long, but this was the first time he had seen such a brilliant smile appear on the Supreme Will's face. It seemed that he was indeed very satisfied with his younger brother's improvement in strength. Reincarnation Will thought happily. Zhou Fight's strength had clearly increased, but at this moment, Reincarnation Will actually looked even happier than Zhou Fight. Sure. As expected by the Reincarnation Will, the Supreme Will praised Zhou Fight generously. You are no longer inferior to God King Heaven Punishment and Spring Autumn Dharma Lord. The Supreme Will said. In fact, he wanted to praise more, but he didn't want Zhou Fight to be too proud, so he praised him without stopping. After you resolve the matter of the Yellow River Realm, go to the Spring Autumn Dharma Lord. I left you an opportunity to advance to the Supreme Will Realm with the Spring Autumn Dharma Lord. It'll make your trip worth it. Zhou Fight's eyes lit up and he nodded vigorously. An opportunity to advance to the Supreme Will Realm. No matter how many of these things he had, he wouldn't mind having more. The Supreme Will smiled and nodded. Then, he chatted with Zhou Zhou and the Reincarnation Will for a while before gradually disappearing. Seeing this, Zhou Fight and the Reincarnation Will discussed how to survive these 3 days. Brother, where are the Supreme Will Realm experts of the 7 illusionary races now? He asked directly. He already felt that he could deal with some Supreme Will Realm experts after knowing the upper limit of his current strength. Therefore, he decided to help the Reincarnation Will share some of the burden. Previously, the 7 of them gathered at the location of the swimming snow sea. The Reincarnation Will said truthfully, however, when I saw that I could not deal with the joint attack of 7 Supreme Will Realm experts, I immediately led the army and left. They are probably looking for me all over the world right now. Brother, do you know the distribution of them? Zhou Fight asked. I know that. Reincarnation Will nodded and took out a map. Zhou Fight raised his eyebrows slightly after sensing the aura of the map. Supreme Will Realm Treasure. Even though it was not at the level of a Will Holy artifact, it was still very precious. This is the Yellow River Realm map that the Yellow River Realm Origin gave me. It updates the geographical changes and the distribution of life forms in the entire Yellow River Realm in real time. We can see where they has gone from this map in real time. At this point, the Reincarnation Will smiled and looked at Zhou Fight. I was able to obtain this Yellow River Realm map from the source of the Yellow River Realm because I am the master of the Netherworld. The Yellow River Realm is the door to the Netherworld and can be considered a subsidiary world of the Netherworld. That's why I was able to obtain it. Actually, you can do it too. You're now the ruler of the Yellow River region who controls the Yellow River Emperor Sword and the Yellow River Stone Slab after all. If you completely control it, you can directly communicate with the world origin of the Yellow River region. Zhou Fight nodded. However, he had only controlled the Yellow River region for a short period of time. It was impossible for he to do so in a short period of time. He could only temporarily borrow the map obtained by the reincarnation will. He looked over and discovered that the 7 Supreme Will Realm experts were divided into 4 parts. 2 of the high-level Supreme Will Realm experts chose to act alone. The other 2 were led by a mid-level Supreme Will Realm expert. These guys are cautious. They knew that if they were alone, it was very likely that they would be attacked by you. Therefore, they chose to join forces to search for your location. Zhou Fight said. Reincarnation Will nodded and said helplessly, I would have killed them one by one if not for them gathering together. Now that they are gathered together, even if I choose the weakest to attack, I won't be able to defeat they in a short period of time. If time drags on and the other Supreme Will Realm experts of the illusionary race catch up, I'll have no choice but to escape. Zhou Fight nodded and voiced his thoughts. Even if we act together, we can't break through these 7 Supreme Will Realm experts in a short period of time. In that case, I have a simple method. Brother, appear first and try your best to stall the Supreme Will Realm experts of the illusionary race. I'll choose one of the groups that is alone and kill them while they are looking for you. Brother, are you confident? Zhou Fight looked at the Reincarnation Will. Reincarnation Will patted his chest and said confidently, don't worry. In terms of combat strength, I might not be as good as them, but in terms of immortality and procrastination. Hehe, I'm the Reincarnation Will, and I control the power of reincarnation. In terms of procrastination, apart from Lord Supreme Will and the Crimson Overlord, if I claim to be first, who else would dare to claim to be second? Zhou Fight nodded. It was precisely because the other party had already faced 7 Supreme Will Realm experts head-on and was safe and sound that he handed the most dangerous mission to the other party. Otherwise, he would have gone to delay the other party's mission. With the 4 Will Holy Artifacts and the Supreme Sacred Body, his ability to stall for time was not weak. It's decided then. Even though Zhou Fight's method was simple, it was also the most direct and effective. Reincarnation Will was a decisive person. He had to do it immediately since he had decided to do something. I'll go find an opportunity now. Once we've attracted enough enemies, I'll inform you. At that time, you can attack. The Reincarnation Will said with a serious expression. Don't worry, brother. Zhou Fight nodded. If the last person to be alone is that high-level Supreme Will Realm enemy, we'll temporarily give up this opportunity and find another opportunity to lure the enemy. The Reincarnation Will said worriedly. Even though he had killed the perverted Martial Emperor. However, the Martial Emperor was still a low-level Supreme Will Realm expert. There was still a certain gap between him and high-level Supreme Will Realm expert, especially a high-level Supreme Will Realm expert who was equipped with a Will Holy Artifact. He didn't want his brother to take such a huge risk. I'll do what I can. Zhou Fight nodded but did not agree. He knew his brother's worries. However, he hadn't used his full strength when he killed the Martial Emperor. Be it the Yellow River's power of the Yellow River Slate or the Yellow River Emperor Sword's fatal strike, he had yet to use them to their limits. Therefore, if there was a chance, he really wanted to fight the Illusionist clan at the high-level Supreme Will Realm. However, since he had not done it yet, there was no need to boast in advance. He would do it first. By the way, brother. It's going to be a dangerous trip. See if you can use these. After Zhou Fight finished speaking, he took out all the Will Holy Artifacts he had obtained from the Martial Emperor and let the Reincarnation Will choose. When the Reincarnation Will saw this, he was shocked again. He raised his head and looked at Zhou Fight as if he was looking at a monster. Chapter 1766, Flowing Swamp Divine Kingdom. 1. Brother. Reincarnation Will could not help but ask, could these Will Holy Artifacts be created by your Lord Talent? No. Zhou Fight didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he shook his head. He didn't expect his Lord Talent to become so famous. These are all the spoils of war I seized from the Martial Emperor. I can't use some of them, so I'll show them to my brother to see if he can use them. The Reincarnation Will heaved a sigh of relief. If his younger brother could even create so many Will Holy Artifacts, then there was no need for him to address each other as brothers. He was directly willing to call the other party daddy. As long as there were enough will holy artifacts, even a strong willpower practitioner could be invited to help him after all. They could even exchange for a will holy artifact inheritance. Even in the entire ultimate void great cosmos, there were very few will holy artifacts after all. The Supreme Will had roamed the ultimate void great cosmos for many years. With his strength and status, didn't he bring many will holy artifacts to the experts of the Supreme Great Cosmos? It was obvious how rare will holy artifacts were. If Zhou Fight really had countless will holy artifacts on him, his status could instantly match or even surpass that of the Supreme Lord, God King Heaven Punishment. He could really do whatever he wanted when he was rich. However, the reincarnation will admired his younger brother even more after coming back to his senses. The martial emperor had so many will holy artifacts. Even if they were only low-level will holy artifacts, they were powerful enough to be difficult to deal with. However, his younger brother still killed the other party. There was no doubt about his younger brother's strength. Then, he didn't stand on ceremony with his younger brother. He immediately chose from the 16 will holy artifacts. Soon, he chose 3 of the will holy artifacts. He equipped them on himself after he got the artifacts to recognize him as their master. Is that all? Zhou Fight was surprised. Only 2 or 3 of The-16 will holy artifacts in his hands could be used now. As for the other will holy artifacts, he couldn't use them all by himself. Since that was the case, he might as well lend them all out so that he wouldn't waste them in his hands. Even Zhou Fight wanted to go all out, including lending out all the will holy artifacts in his hands to increase his chances of winning facing 7 Supreme Will Realm enemies. Enough. The reincarnation will smiled and said, I already have a complete set of will holy artifacts with these 3 will holy artifacts. It's useless to me even if I have more. Ha 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 ha. Good brother. I'm much more confident in delaying the missions of those Supreme Will Realm experts with the 3 will holy artifacts you provided. I think the success rate of our plan this time has increased by at least 20%. Zhou Fight smiled and nodded. Then, the two of them discussed the details. The reincarnation will left behind a copy of the Yellow River Realm map and left. Zhou Fight did not leave for the time being. Instead, he looked at the map in front of him and his gaze landed on the Black State Swamp. This was a famous place in the Yellow River region. A large group of sinful life forms that could not reincarnate were gathered there. They gathered on the swamp of the Black State Swamp in the Yellow River realm, forming various factions of various sizes that fought endlessly against each other. After the arrival of the Illusionist clan, they also attacked the Black State Swamp, but they were strongly resisted by the rebellious evil forces of the Black State. Even though the Illusionist clan still had the upper hand in the end, the Black State Swamp had become one of the few areas in the Yellow River that had not been completely conquered by the Illusionist clan. However, the Illusionist clan was too powerful to be resisted by these small forces. If they abandoned it, this place would eventually be conquered by the Illusionist clan and become their territory. The reason why Zhou Fight paid special attention to this place was not because this place had not been completely conquered, but because 3 of the 7 Supreme Will Realm experts of the Illusionary clan were gathered here. Led by a mid-level Supreme Will Realm expert of the Illusionary race and 2 low-level Supreme Will Realm experts of the Illusionary race. According to the results of the reincarnation will and his discussion, when the reincarnation will began to be the target and attracted them to attack, the 3 Supreme Will Realm experts in the Black State Swamp were most likely to be alone because they were the furthest away from the other Supreme Will Realm experts. In addition, the reincarnation will deliberately guided them in their pursuit route. At that time, when the reincarnation will began its plan, Zhou Fight would take action to eliminate these 3 Supreme Will Realm experts. Then, the plan that they had discussed would most likely succeed. 3 Supreme Will Realm experts. Every one of them is carrying at least 1 will holy artifact. It feels a little difficult, but it shouldn't be too difficult. Zhou Fight muttered to himself. After the battle with the Martial Emperor, he had a certain understanding of his own combat strength. Even though the 3 Supreme Will Realm experts looked intimidating, there was actually a high chance that he could kill them all in a short period of time. Let's get moving. Zhou Fight put away the Yellow River Realm map and immediately led his army to the Black State Swamp. The Black State Swamp. Law skills scattered wantonly on this swamp that few undead approached, like meteors dancing. The 2 forces were engaged in a life or death battle on the swamp. The army of the Illusionist clan was attacking from above with the help of the cosmic warships. Chapter 1767, Flowing Swamp Divine Kingdom. 2. At the bottom, the Flowing Swamp Divine Kingdom, one of the 3 major factions in the Black State Swamp, used the city as a defense facility to counterattack. This divine kingdom was the territory of a beginner-grade master god-tier lord. Judging from the battle situation, the flowing swamp divine kingdom had already fallen into an absolute disadvantage because more than half of their defense wall had been destroyed under the continuous attack of the conceptual divine power of the Illusionist clan, and more than 80% of the undead army that was defending and counter-attacking in the divine kingdom had died. If it weren't for the fact that the surviving undead were all experts of the flowing swamp divine kingdom and were defending and counter-attacking at the cost of their souls, this flowing swamp divine kingdom would have long been destroyed under the powerful offensive of the illusionary race. However, the current situation was also very bad. Anyone with a discerning eye could tell that it would not be long before this group of experts from the flowing swamp divine kingdom died. The flowing swamp divine kingdom would no longer be able to resist. Among the experts of the flowing swamp divine kingdom who insisted on resisting, a skinny expert with a blood-colored punishment tattoo flew out of the city wall of the flowing swamp divine kingdom countless times and fought with the experts of the Illusionist clan. Then, he flew back with injuries all over his body and received treatment from the supreme god of his divine kingdom, preparing for the next counterattack. That quasi-supreme will realm expert of the illusionary clan sneaked up on me and tricked me. Otherwise, I could have killed at least 10 of them and come back to treat them. Flowing swamp god lord cursed as he received treatment. Hearing this, the other supreme gods around him also cursed. After cursing, they laughed out loud again. At this moment, a group of servants walked in quickly with a large amount of delicacies. They quickly left after putting down the delicacies. Let's eat now that things have come to this. We'll kill them after replenishing the divine power. After flowing swamp god lord finished speaking, he immediately sat at the dining table and started eating. The other supreme gods were not restrained at all. They sat beside the flowing swamp god lord and ate with him. Let me tell you, the Illusionist clan is quite law-abiding. I can already sense the aura of the Supreme Will Realm experts behind them. Furthermore, there's more than one of them. However, they actually didn't make a move. Instead, they asked us to fight their subordinates. The flowing swamp god lord chuckled. If that group of Supreme Will Realm experts had attacked, your god lord would have died long ago. We are mobile military achievements to the experts of the same level as them. Those Supreme Will Realm experts will not snatch military achievements from their subordinates. That's why they did not take action and let us fight with their subordinates. A supreme god explained. Who cares what they are up to? Another supreme god sneered. We'll drag a few supreme gods of the Illusionist clan down with us before we die since their supreme willpower realm experts aren't going to make a move. It's a win to bring down more than one. All the supreme gods nodded in agreement. The darkness god lord has fallen. At this moment, a supreme god of the flowing swamp divine kingdom suddenly said. As soon as he finished speaking, the gods who were still discussing fervently suddenly fell silent for a second before continuing to eat as if nothing had happened. I will avenge him. The flowing swamp god lord gnashed his teeth as he ate the god-tier delicacies. The other supreme gods also made promises. They did not say anything like should we surrender, what should we do if we lose, or should we escape. They seemed to be a group of brave warriors who disregarded their lives and were calmly facing their fates. How many restorative medicines are there? The flowing swamp god lord asked casually. Not much. At most, we can hold on for another 2 hours. The supreme god in charge of logistics also said casually. Does that mean we have another 2 hours to live? Flowing swamp god lord laughed loudly. Then why aren't you eating more? We won't be able to eat such delicious food when our souls dissipate. So what? Another supreme god said nonchalantly. We can eat with our fallen brothers down there. Are you out of your mind? Flowing swamp god lord scolded jokingly, you and I are already undead. How can there be a bottom after our souls disintegrate? What if there is? The supreme god refuted him. Idiot! The flowing swamp god lord cursed. There would be nothing left if his soul dissipated. The supreme god who was scolded did not care. He even boldly snatched the delicacies in front of flowing swamp god lord. The flowing swamp god lord also disregarded etiquette and snatched the delicacies with the other party. And so, this delicious meal was finished amidst the laughter and curses of the gods and the exchange of information. I'm full. Let's go. The flowing swamp divine kingdom wiped its mouth, picked up its weapon, and was about to run to the battlefield again. Seeing this, the other supreme gods also flew into the sky with the other god lords. However, the moment they saw the enemy, their expressions changed slightly. 3 existences emitting a terrifying pressure were sitting high in the sky, like supreme gods staring coldly at the living beings below. The supreme will realm experts of the illusionary clan. The flowing swamp god lord gritted his teeth. What is going on? Didn't these guys not participate in the fight previously? Why are they suddenly standing out now? Actually, these three supreme will realm experts were also a little helpless. Normally, they would not fight with these supreme gods since they had subordinates of the supreme gods levels after all. These supreme gods under the supreme will could be left to them to sharpen them and also accumulate military merits for them to improve themselves. They were more or less bullying the weak when they attacked. However, an accident happened. The death of the martial emperor made the fearless king furious. He ordered to send out all the supreme will realm experts and lead his subordinates to find the common people's regal and the reincarnation will as soon as possible and eliminate these two fellows. In order to carry out the order and find the common people's regal and the reincarnation will as soon as possible, they could not stay in one place for long. Furthermore, the group of people from the flowing swamp divine kingdom had been resisting desperately. They did not give up even though they knew that they were in a desperate situation. Therefore, they could only take action personally. Even if it would affect the growth of their subordinates, they had to end this war that should have ended long ago. Brothers, looks like we won't be able to drag the enemy down with us. The flowing swamp god lord grinned. Then, his expression turned solemn. Nevertheless, even if we have to face an enemy that far surpasses us, we can't lose face either. Even if we are going to perish, we have to perish on the path of attacking them. Let's show them and the other worldlings what we mean by not fearing death. There are no cowards in the flowing swamp divine kingdom. Towards the end, he couldn't help but think of his fallen subordinates and roared with tears in his eyes. There are no cowards in the flowing swamp divine kingdom. His subordinates also roared one after another. None of the supreme gods had any thoughts of retreating. This is a battle of existences where either he dies or I live. They had long realized this point. Therefore, none of them had any intention of retreating. Faced with the surging fighting spirit of the flowing swamp divine kingdom, the low-level supreme will realm expert of the illusionary race, the master of spirit devourers, clapped his hands and praised, "What a good scene! What a warrior and brotherhood worthy of praise! Don't waste time. Let's finish this as soon as possible. Then, we'll leave immediately and find the fearless king." Another mid-level supreme will realm expert, spirit sovereign Boulder, said coldly, "The fearless king has already discovered that fellow, reincarnation will. The other supreme will realm experts have already chased after him. We've already delayed here for too long. If we're any later, we won't even be able to get anything." Yes. The master of spirit devourers and another low-level supreme will realm expert nodded. They were not interested in the military achievements of the supreme gods, but they were too interested in the military achievements of supreme will realm experts. Chapter 1768, 1v3. Common People's Martial Arts. 1. The master of spirit devourers was prepared to deal with them. He pressed his palms together and quickly condensed a divine power ball between his hands. The power emitted by the divine power ball was comparable to the sum of the divine power condensed from the divine power of thousands of supreme gods. It might far exceed the limit of the quasi-supreme will realm. Even though it could not reach the quasi-supreme will realm, it still made flowing swamp god lord and the others tremble in fear. Go! The master of spirit devourers smiled and threw the ball of light in his hand at a grade 4 supreme god not far from the flowing swamp god lord. This divine power ball was extremely fast. The grade 4 supreme god's head had already disappeared before he could even react. Fire illusion! The flowing swamp god lord and the other supreme gods roared. However, this was not the end. After the divine power ball passed through the fire illusion god lord's head, it continued to charge towards the second grade 4 supreme god. The grade 4 supreme god's pupils constricted, and he immediately turned into a black stream of light, wanting to escape. However, the speed of the divine power ball was too fast. Just as he wanted to escape, his head was penetrated by the divine power ball again. The flowing swamp god lord's team lost another god lord. "I'll fight it out with you." He saw two comrades die in front of him. The three grade 4 supreme gods went from fear to anger. They, who felt that it was not a big deal to die, simply erupted with all their courage and teleported away from the spot together, planning to attack the master of spirit devourers together. "You overestimate yourself." The master of spirit devourers had a faint mocking smile on his lips. He did not care about the surprise attack of the three gods at all. He did not even move. The divine power ball instantly teleported and disappeared. Swish! 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 It appeared 3 times in a row in reality, and each time it appeared, it brought out a corpse. It was the corpses of the 3 supreme gods in the flowing swamp god lord's team who had teleported away and wanted to ambush the master of spirit devourers. The deities were all terrified when they saw this scene. Was this the supreme will realm? Even if it was just a casual attack that made them have no intention of resisting and could only watch as death descended on them? What a despairing thought! How boring! The master of spirit devourers even yawned. The divine power ball that he used was just a method he used to deal with the soldiers when he was at the supreme god realm. Even the flowing swamp god lords were unable to deal with such supreme god level techniques after him used them, let alone supreme will realm techniques or his conceptual god powers. At the same time, the supreme gods beside the flowing swamp god lord were also using various methods. Some wanted to rush to the master of spirit devourer's side and deal with him, some used various law skills to shatter the divine power ball, some used other control-type law skills to affect the master of spirit devourer's control of the divine power ball and help them gain a breather. However, they all failed. Those who wanted to deal with the master of spirit devourers were killed by the divine power ball before they could rush over. They lost their lives in vain. Those who wanted to shatter the divine power ball discovered that the sturdiness of the divine power ball was beyond their imagination. Their nomological skills could not injure it at all. The supreme god who wanted to use a control-type law skill was even more delusional in a desperate situation. How could the supreme god control a supreme will realm expert? It was just a waste of energy. Flowing swamp god lord's eyes were red as he watched his brothers die in front of him one by one. It was unknown if it was intentional or not, but after the divine power ball killed most of the supreme gods, it actually left the flowing swamp god lord behind. How could he not guess what he meant after he saw this scene? This was to make he completely recognize the truth and despair. When the master of spirit devourers saw this scene, he could not help but sneer. Haha! A few mere supreme gods and a quasi-supreme will realm expert actually stopped us for so long. I'll let you know the difference in strength. Previously, I was merely using you all to train our juniors. With that, the master of spirit devourers no longer had the intention to play with the other party. They still had to deal with the reincarnation will after all. Go! The divine power ball rushed towards the flowing swamp god lord with a thought from him. Facing the attack of the master of spirit devourers, even though flowing swamp god lord knew that he could not block it, he still chose to erupt with all his might and prepared to defend with all his might. He punched the divine power ball before his face turned pale. He missed. Buzz! The divine power ball quietly appeared behind him and instantly rushed towards his head. Flowing swamp god lord had a calm expression and decided to throw his life away. At this critical moment, a figure suddenly appeared between the ball of light and flowing swamp god lord. He stretched out his right hand and grabbed the ball of divine power in an instant. Then, he exerted force, and the ball of light that was condensed with the divine power of countless supreme gods actually shattered directly. The master of spirit devourers and the other 2 supreme will realm experts narrowed their eyes slightly at Zhou Fight, who had suddenly appeared. The flowing swamp god lord was also stunned. He turned his head to look. He immediately said excitedly after discovering the person, Lord Common People's Regal. Even though they were the undead of the Yellow River region, the name Common People's Regal was still well known. Zhou Fight did not say anything. He only frowned slightly as he looked at everything around him and the ruined flowing swamp divine capital below. We're still a step behind. He frowned slightly and muttered to himself. It couldn't be helped. The place where he was previously was very far from the Black State Swamp. To be able to rush over at this time was already the result of him advancing at full speed. Chapter 1769, 1v3. Common People's Martial Arts. 2. The Destruction of the Divine Soul. It's not impossible to revive. Zhou Fight thought to himself. There was only one way to revive him with his divine soul destroyed. That was to turn back time. Coincidentally, there happened to be a quasi-supreme will realm expert who was good at the Dao of time among the many supreme gods under him. Zhou Fight had the myriad method star palm. If he borrowed its ability, it would naturally not be a problem for him to revive this group of undead. As for why he wanted to revive this group of undead? Naturally, he had already learned what had just happened here. Even though this group of sinful and evil life forms had done many wrong things when they were alive, since they had already died and become undead, there was no need to keep chasing and criticizing them. Even criminals would one day be released after serving their sentence after all. Also, he had to reward them for their contributions since these guys were brave enough to resist the Illusionist clan until they died in battle. Then his resurrection would be the reward of this fallen supreme god. These thoughts flashed across Zhou Fight's mind. He looked up at the master of spirit devourers and the other two supreme will realm experts of the illusionary race, ignoring the flowing swamp god lord who was looking at him fanatically. A faint smile appeared on his face. Found you. You're the common people's regal. The master of spirit devourers and the other supreme will realm experts stared at Zhou Fight and asked. There was a certain tone in their tone even though they were asking. It was obvious that Zhou Fight's identity had been confirmed. Zhou Fight smiled and didn't answer. He waved his hand casually and released a group of cosmic battleships. Then, a large number of troops of the Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom flew out of the cosmic battleships and confronted the Illusionist clan's army led by the Master of Spirit Devourers and other Supreme Will Realm experts of the Illusionist clan. We're asking you a question. Are you the common people's regal? Disrespectful junior. Even if you and I are enemies, respecting the strong is also a basic principle. Faced with Zhou Fight's silence, the expressions of the Master of Spirit Devourers and the other Supreme Will Realm experts darkened as they asked coldly. This emperor doesn't like to talk to the god of death. Zhou Fight said calmly. Arrogant. The Master of Spirit Devourers and the other two Supreme Will Realm experts immediately widened their eyes in anger and looked at Zhou Fight with killing intent. They were three Supreme Will Realm experts. Even if the martial emperor came, he would have to retreat obediently in the face of their combined forces and the other two. He did not expect to encounter a fellow like Zhou Fight who did not know the immensity of heaven and earth. The flowing swamp god lord, who was behind him, widened his eyes and looked at Zhou Fight in shock and admiration. He didn't expect it either. In the face of three Supreme Will Realm experts, the common people's regal, who was only a grade 3 Supreme God Realm expert, was actually so calm and composed. He even said that these three Supreme Will Realm experts were dead. Arrogant. How arrogant? He was too arrogant. However, this arrogance really made him like and even worship him. The flowing swamp god lord. He thought that he was already a very arrogant god lord. Even when facing a Supreme Will Realm expert, he would definitely not submit. He would even dare to lead his brothers to charge at a Supreme Will Realm expert at the most dangerous moment. In front of any god spirit, such an action was enough for them to call themselves warriors. However, in front of the arrogance of this common people's regal, his arrogance seemed to be insufficient. As expected of the last Supreme Lord Reserve Army selected by the Supreme Will. The flowing swamp god lord thought. Then, he became curious. If the common people's regal was so arrogant, then did he have the confidence to be so arrogant? Zhou Fight seemed to have heard what flowing swamp god lord was thinking and quickly gave he an answer. Zhou Fight was very calm in the face of the angry gazes of the Master of Spirit Devourers and the other two Supreme Will Realm experts. They were right. Even the martial emperor could only retreat in defeat in front of the three of them. However, he was no longer he when he fought the martial emperor. The current him was already stronger than the him back then. Attack. The Master of Spirit Devourers looked at each other and chose to attack together to deal with Zhou Fight, a grade 3 Supreme God Realm. Even the flowing swamp god lord's eyes widened at this scene. Good God! 3 Supreme Will Realm experts dealing with a grade 3 Supreme God Realm expert together? Are you all shameless? However, Zhou Fight was very calm. He clenched his fist slightly and used King to immediately raise his cultivation level to a level infinitely close to the low-level Supreme Will Realm. Then, with the thought, a total of 7 Will Holy Artifacts were attached to him. The two most obvious Will Holy Artifacts were the high-level Will Holy Artifact Yellow River Slate and the high-level Will Holy Artifact Yellow River Thearch Sword. The Yellow River Stone Slab emitted a dense yellow light. Powerful Yellow River power surged out of the Yellow River Stone Slab and surged into Zhou Fight's divine body, instantly increasing his strength to the level of a low-level Supreme Will Realm expert. The total amount of Yellow River's power is limited. I'll save as much as possible. Zhou Fight thought to himself. The strength of a low-level Supreme Will Realm expert was enough for him to use all his current methods in a short period of time. The Master of Spirit Devourers and the other Supreme Will Realm experts were also shocked when they saw Zhou Fight's strength instantly increase to the low-level Supreme Will Realm. However, they quickly came back to their senses and continued to charge at Zhou Fight. How could a low-level Supreme Will Realm expert compare to the encirclement of the three experts? This common people's regal would definitely die today. The military merits on him that were comparable to high-level Supreme Will Realm experts must belong to them. Compared to the common people's regal, even the military merits on the reincarnation will were much lesser. Zhou Fight instantly disappeared from the spot seeing this. In the next moment, he had already appeared in the center of the three Illusionist clan experts. He first slashed at one of the Master of Spirit Devourer's arms and severed it. Then, he kicked another low-level Supreme Will Realm expert, causing him to vomit blood. Then, he used the reaction force to fly towards the middle stage Supreme Will Realm expert, Spiritual Venerable Boulder, and quickly arrived in front of him. Zhou Fight thrust his sword over, only to discover that this fellow's physical defense was extremely strong. At this moment, the Xian Yuan Divine Sword, a low-level Will Holy artifact, actually failed to break through his opponent's defense. A look of surprise flashed in his eyes. Not only is my physical defense strong, I'm also wearing a defensive Will Holy artifact on the surface. You want to break my defense with just a low-level Will Holy artifact? Dream on! The Spiritual Venerable Boulder said coldly. With that, he quickly approached the other party and engaged in close combat with Zhou Fight. Only then did Zhou Fight realize that the Spiritual Venerable Boulder was also a martial arts expert. Even though it could not compare to a martial emperor, it had already reached the martial arts level of the Supreme Will Realm. The two of them began to fight quickly. As a martial arts expert at the Supreme Will Realm, he had a contemptuous attitude towards the common people's regal for actually daring to fight him in close combat. However, the Spiritual Venerable Boulder's expression suddenly changed not long after they fought. This was because he discovered that the other party could actually suppress him with pure martial arts. He was a martial Dao expert at the low-level Supreme Will Realm. And the other party was actually stronger than him. More importantly, he actually felt a familiar feeling from the other party's martial arts path. Martial Emperor style. The Spiritual Venerable Boulder suddenly reacted, and then he felt that something was wrong. No, it's a little similar, but it's not completely similar. This isn't the martial Emperor style. As Zhou Fight fought and suppressed the other party, he said, this is this Emperor's martial arts. You can call it the common people's martial arts. He had already sorted out all the martial Emperor's spoils of war before he came. Then, he discovered a legacy that was not weaker than a Will Holy artifact. That was the martial Emperor's martial arts legacy. Zhou Fight immediately learned it and combined it with his own understanding of martial arts to create this martial arts path. This common people's martial arts had already surpassed the martial Emperor style and become a martial arts path that was infinitely close to the high-level Supreme Will Realm. This was also the reason why Zhou Fight was able to suppress the Spiritual Venerable Boulder. Chapter 1770, Killing 3 Supreme Will Realm Experts. 1. The Spiritual Venerable Boulder looked at Zhou Fight's face and felt a chill run down his spine. Such a young junior had actually created a martial arts path comparable to mid-level Supreme Will Realm with just the Grade 3 Supreme God Realm. What kind of monstrous talent was this? What would happen if he continued to grow? In the future, he might grow into an existence like the Supreme Will. At that time, if the Illusionist clan wanted to break through the Supreme Great Cosmos and use the Supreme Great Cosmos as a springboard to attack the Ultimate Void Great Cosmos, the difficulty would definitely increase again. This guy could not be left alive. This thought appeared in Spiritual Venerable Boulder's mind. He wanted to kill Zhou Fight, but the huge difference in martial arts realm made it impossible for him to injure Zhou Fight. On the other hand, he had suffered repeated setbacks in the face of Zhou Fight's attacks. If he didn't have extremely strong physical defense and wasn't wearing a defensive mid-level Will Holy artifact, he would probably be covered in injuries by now. Fortunately, the 2 low-level Supreme Will Realm experts of the Master of Spirit Devourers quickly arrived. The 3 of them joined forces to suppress Zhou Fight, and they finally barely reached a draw. However, it was only a draw. With the support of the 7 Will Holy artifacts, the Supreme Sacred Body, and the common people's martial arts, Zhou Fight's strength far exceeded their imaginations. Even if 3 low-level Supreme Will Realm experts with Will Holy artifacts joined forces, it was still very difficult to fight Zhou Fight. If he was not careful, he would leave an injury caused by the Xian Yuan Divine Sword on his body. Only Spiritual Venerable Boulder was slightly better off with his powerful defense, but he was still suppressed. Damn it! This guy is actually so strong. The Supreme Will Realm experts of the 3 illusionary races were very shocked. The 3 god spirits looked at each other and nodded slightly. The Spiritual Venerable Boulder's body suddenly emitted a dense white rock light. Conceptual God ability stone armor. It could reflect all attacks on the body. Zhou Fight punched the other party's body and actually felt the same force coming from the other party's body. Fortunately, he was wearing a will holy artifact and had the supreme sacred body, so the rebounding force did not injure him at all. On the other side, the Master of Spirit Devourers and another low-level Supreme Will Realm expert also launched the Concept God attack. The conceptual divine power of the Master of Spirit Devourers was called Spirit Devourers. It was similar to Spiritual Venerable Boulder. He could absorb energy attacks and store them in its body. He could use the energy it absorbed however he wanted. The divine power ball that he had used to attack the flowing swamp god lord was the energy ball that he had gathered from the supreme god enemies he had faced when he was still a supreme god. The flowing swamp god lords, they were already helpless against a divine power ball of that level. However, the Master of Spirit Devourers had witnessed the scene of Zhou Fight exploding the divine power ball with one hand and knew that ordinary attacks had no effect on Zhou Fight. Therefore, he hardened his heart and directly gathered nearly 90% of the divine power and willpower in his body, forming a super energy ball with astonishing might. The power of this super energy ball was so great that Zhou Fight and the other two Supreme Will Realm experts were attracted. A move at the upper Supreme Will Realm. Zhou Fight raised his eyebrows in surprise. He did not expect this fellow to use the strongest attack. He was called the Master of Stasis as for the last Supreme Will Realm expert of the illusionary race. His ability was to freeze time. This conceptual god ability was actually not outstanding. Many experts who walked the Dao of time in the Supreme Great Cosmos knew this move. Therefore, Zhou Fight only took a glance before retracting his gaze. He looked at these three Supreme Will Realm experts with a very calm expression. He did not panic at all. He did not even activate the power of the Yellow River to raise his level to the middle or upper Supreme Will Realm. Clearly, in Zhou Fight's opinion, the current situation was not worth he wasting the power of the Yellow River to become stronger. Since you've all used your true abilities, then this Emperor will play with you guys too. Zhou Fight's eyes lit up. In an instant. Law Domain Skill Land of Earth, a Minister of the King. Under the activation of the power of the Yellow River, the power of the Land of Earth, a Minister of the King was almost not inferior to a low-level will skill of the same level. When it was at the Grade 3 Supreme God Realm, it could suppress the domain of a low-level Supreme Will Realm expert and the strength of a low-level Supreme Will Realm expert. Once the Land of Earth, a Minister of the King, which was already comparable to a low-level Will Holy Artifact, was used, the three low-level Supreme Will Realm experts of the Illusionist clan and even the army of the Illusionist clan led by they felt that their strength and conceptual god abilities were greatly suppressed. What kind of will skill is this? It's actually suppressing us so much. The spiritual Venerable Boulder and them were instantly shocked. Zhou Fight did not stop. He put away the Xian Yuan Divine Sword. With a thought, he finally took out the high-level Will Holy Artifact, the Yellow River Emperor Sword. As soon as this Will Holy Artifact was taken out, the spiritual Venerable Boulder and them immediately felt a shocking sense of threat from this sword. It's a superior Will Holy Artifact. They could not hide their surprise. At this moment, Zhou Fight was already flying towards them. His first target was spiritual Venerable Boulder, who was confident in his strong defense. Chapter 1771, Killing 3 Supreme Will Realm Experts. 2. However, this spiritual Venerable Boulder was different from before. Now that he saw Zhou Fight rushing towards him, he only hesitated for a second before turning around and fleeing without hesitation. This action stunned the flowing swamp god lord. However, spiritual Venerable Boulder couldn't say anything. Previously, he had been confident in his strong defense because the other party's Xian Yuan Divine Sword was only a low-level Will Holy Artifact. It could not break his defense at all. That was why he was so confident in resisting the other party's attack. However, Zhou Fight had switched to a high-level Will Holy Artifact, the Yellow River Emperor Sword. That was a high-level Will Holy Artifact. Even if he had activated the conceptual god's ability and could reflect a certain amount of attacks, he would still die under Yellow River's Emperor Sword. He didn't want to do something like exchanging a life for a life. Trying to run. Zhou Fight snorted and sped up again, catching up to the spiritual Venerable Boulder. The spiritual Venerable Boulder was shocked when he saw this. Seeing that his opponent's Yellow River Emperor Sword was about to land on him, spiritual Venerable Boulder gritted his teeth and immediately activated his defense and Will Holy Artifact defense to the maximum. At the same time, he activated his conceptual divine power to the extreme. I don't believe it. This guy is really willing to exchange his life for mine. Swoosh. The sword fell. Spiritual Venerable Boulder felt a chill on his right arm. He opened his eyes and realized that his right arm had been cut off. He immediately looked at Zhou Fight, ignoring the pain in his body. However, he saw a scene that he couldn't believe. Zhou Fight was unscathed. He looked as if he was not affected by the rebound damage at all. How is that possible? The spiritual venerable boulder was dumbfounded. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. Could it be that his conceptual divine power had lost its effect? This had never happened before? Zhou Fight suddenly laughed out loud after being puzzled. What are you laughing at? The spiritual venerable boulder couldn't help but roar, sensing that the other party was mocking him. Zhou Fight laughed coldly without saying a word as he casually cut off the other arm. In fact, he just wanted to give it a try. Unexpectedly, it really succeeded. In fact, spiritual venerable boulder's conceptual god power had already succeeded. However, the attacks from the power of the Yellow River that it had rebounded from the conceptual god's ability were all absorbed by Zhou Fight's Yellow River slate. This also caused Zhou Fight to recover a portion of the Yellow River's power in the blink of an eye after using this strike. Thus, only spiritual venerable boulder's injured world was born. Zhou Fight continued to attack spiritual venerable boulder relentlessly. He attacked extremely quickly. In the blink of an eye, the spiritual venerable boulder, who was as strong as a boulder, was cut into a stone stick by him. Help me! The spiritual venerable boulder cried for help in panic. The Master of Spirit Devourers and the Master of Stasis did not expect things to change so quickly. In the blink of an eye, the strongest among them was actually about to be defeated by Zhou Fight. They immediately carried out the rescue in their anxiety. They had no choice but to rescue him. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to escape either if the spiritual venerable boulder died. Go! With a command from the Master of Spirit Devourers, the super energy ball condensed in his hand instantly flew towards Zhou Fight. Master of Stasis also activated his time stasis ability, wanting to stop Zhou Fight from killing spiritual venerable boulder. However, under the suppression of Land of Earth, a minister of the King's domain skill, his time stasis conceptual god ability only stopped Zhou Fight's figure for a moment before it could no longer affect Zhou Fight. The Master of Spirit Devourer's super energy ball quickly approached Zhou Fight. However, after entering the Land of Earth, a minister of the King domain around Zhou Fight, it was affected by the suppression effect of the domain. This super energy ball, which was originally at the upper Supreme Will realm, was actually suppressed to the middle Supreme Will realm. When Zhou Fight saw this energy ball, he suddenly turned around and slashed at it with the Yellow River Emperor sword. Swoosh! A faint yellow light flashed. This super energy ball was directly cut in half and gradually dissipated in the air. Zhou Fight glanced at the Master of Spirit Devourers and the Master of Stasis. Then, he ignored them and chased after the spiritual venerable boulder. The spiritual venerable boulder died on the spot after piercing the will core in the other party's brain. Zhou Fight nimbly put away their corpses and turned to look at the Master of Spirit Devourers and the Master of Stasis after killing them. When the Master of Spirit Devourers and the Master of Stasis saw this scene, their souls immediately left their bodies. They turned around and teleported into the distance without thinking. Trying to escape. Zhou Fight said calmly, "You can't escape from my domain." He vanished on the spot. In the next second, he had appeared in front of the Master of Stasis. The Master of Stasis screamed in fear when he saw Zhou Fight suddenly appear in front of him. Then, he immediately activated his time stasis ability to control Zhou Fight. However, when he turned around to escape, he realized that Zhou Fight was standing behind him with a calm expression. "What you're freezing is just a temporary incarnation of mine. You're too flustered. You didn't even notice my clone." Just as the Master of Stasis was about to say something, he saw Zhou Fight's sword slashing over. The Master of Stasis's vision instantly fell into darkness. Zhou Fight picked up the Master of Stasis corpse and threw it into his #1 treasure vault. Then, he teleported again and appeared in front of the Master of Spirit Devourers. The Master of Spirit Devourers did not have much willpower left after condensing the super energy ball just now. In the face of Zhou Fight's attack, he was even inferior to the Master of Stasis. He could not even counterattack before his head was cut off by Zhou Fight, destroying the willpower core in his head. A bunch of dogs and chickens. Zhou Fight shook his head. He did not even use much of the Yellow River's power to kill them. The current his was probably only a high-level Supreme Will Realm expert who could pose some threat to him. Low-level Supreme Will Realm experts and mid-level Supreme Will Realm experts. Other than those geniuses with heaven-defying combat strength, it was already very difficult for the other experts to make him feel danger. He looked at the battlefield. At this moment, the army of the Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom under him was fighting the army of the illusionary race. Even though the illusionary race's army had also seen the death of the 3 Supreme Will Realm experts, they did not panic because of this. This was because the quasi-Supreme Will Realm experts among them had taken over the command of the army and were still commanding the army to fight the Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom's army. But even so, under the suppression of Zhou Fight's Land of Earth, a minister of the king's domain, the strength of the Illusionist clan's army was greatly reduced. In addition, the Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom's army was already extraordinary tier. Even though the Illusionist clan's army was powerful, they were still at a huge disadvantage under the strong offensive suppression of the Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom's army. Zhou Fight could tell that in less than 2 hours, the illusionary army would definitely be defeated. This time was already very short. However, Zhou Fight still felt that this was a little too long. He couldn't stay here for too long. Otherwise, it wouldn't be good if the enemies attracted by the reincarnation will found out about the situation on his end and gave up on the reincarnation will to find trouble with him. Therefore, he only thought about it for a moment before choosing to hold the Yellow River Emperor's sword and personally charge into the battlefield to help the Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom's army destroy the illusionary race army in front of him. With Zhou Fight's help, the illusionary army was wiped out in less than an hour. Zhou Fight immediately ordered the army to return to the cosmic warship and leave this place, waiting for the next order from the reincarnation will. Just as they was preparing to retreat, the flowing swamp god lord came back to his senses and immediately shouted excitedly. Your Excellency Common People's Regal, I'm willing to lead all the subjects of the flowing swamp divine kingdom to join the Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom. Please allow me to join. He waited uneasily after he finished speaking. A faint voice sounded in his mind. Your flowing swamp divine kingdom can join the Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom. Bring all the subjects in your divine kingdom. As long as you have sins, you have to do a certain amount of good deeds to become a subject of the Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom. Especially you. If you can persist in doing good deeds for 100,000 years to make up for the sins you committed when you were alive and after you died, this emperor will allow you to become a citizen of the Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom. I'm willing. The flowing swamp god lord agreed without hesitation. After this battle, the common people's regal had already left an extremely revered impression in his heart. Not to mention asking him to do good deeds, even if he were to be a slave for the rest of his life, he would be willing to follow by the side of the common people's regal. A faint grunt sounded in the air after hearing his answer. Chapter 1772, War Summary 1. At the same time, in the illusion heavenly desert, 4 figures emitting a terrifying will pressure were chasing after another figure. This figure was none other than the reincarnation will. At that moment, he had a calm expression. Even though he was facing the pursuit of 4 Supreme Will Realm experts, not only was he not flustered, he even had the time to turn around and counterattack the pursuers behind him. Seeing how they were extremely angry but unable to catch up to him, he couldn't help but smile. He lowered his head and touched the Will Holy artifact on him. He could not help but sigh. Fortunately, I borrowed these 3 defensive holy artifacts from my brother. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to lure the enemy away so calmly. In the past, almost all the willpower holy artifacts that he possessed were offensive holy artifacts. This allowed he to obtain a huge suppressive advantage when attacking enemies weaker than him. But when he encountered an enemy that was far stronger than him, the shortcoming of not having a defensive will holy artifact became apparent. No matter how good an offensive will holy artifact was, if the enemy could ignore his offensive will holy artifact just by relying on their strength, then there was not much difference whether they had this will holy artifact or not after all. On the other hand, defensive will holy artifacts could increase his chances of self-preservation and retreat. Thinking of this will holy artifact, the reincarnation will thought of Zhou Fight. I wonder what's the situation over there with this brother of mine who has created many miracles. I wonder what's the situation over there with this brother of mine who has created many miracles. When he first found out that his younger brother's goal was 3 low-level Supreme Will Realm experts, he was very against it. Even though his younger brother had already killed 2 Supreme Will Realm experts, there was an essential difference between 1v1 and 1v3 after all. Even a martial emperor would not dare to resist the siege of 3 low-level Supreme Will Realm experts and could only think of a way to escape. Not to mention killing them. A grade 3 Supreme God Realm killed 3 low-level Supreme Will Realm experts? Or a low-level Supreme Will Realm expert carrying a Will Holy artifact? This sounded like a fantasy. If not for the fact that the reincarnation will trusted his brother very much, how could he be willing to let he carry out this crazy plan? Drag. Delay as much as possible. As long as I stall for enough time, even if my brother can't kill those 3 Supreme Will Realm experts, he will at least have more time to escape. The reincarnation will's eyes were filled with determination. He had to take some risks in order to stall for time with the means he had. However, he was willing to do such a thing for him in order for him to successfully escape. This was because he was not only his brother, but also because he saw hope in him to end the war with the Illusionist clan. Just as he was about to take action, several angry roars suddenly sounded from behind him. Then, he was shocked to discover that the 4 Supreme Will Realm experts chasing from behind him had suddenly stopped chasing him. What happened? He looked a little lost. At this moment, his personal terminal suddenly rang. The reincarnation will took a look and realized that it was Zhou Fight's call. He quickly answered the call and heard a calm voice from the other end. Brother! The 3 supreme gods, including the master of spirit devourers, have been dealt with. Be careful on your side. I'm afraid that in their exasperation, they will kill you at all costs. Reincarnation will was stunned after hearing this. He subconsciously looked at the 4 Supreme Will Realm experts who had left and suddenly laughed out loud. He originally thought that it would be good enough if his younger brother could keep him alive. He never expected that his younger brother could actually kill 3 Supreme Will Realm experts in a 1v3. Even if they were only low-level Supreme Will Realm experts, it was enough to shock the myriad worlds. After he smiled, he chased after the 4 Supreme Will Realm experts and sent a message. The 4 Supreme Will Realm experts of the illusionary race on my side already know that you killed them. They have chased after them angrily now. I'll try my best to stall them. Be careful on your side. The reincarnation will reminded. Don't worry, brother. I know what I'm doing. Zhou Fight smiled. He would naturally be cautious. Those were 2 high-level Supreme Will Realm experts, a mid-level Supreme Will Realm expert, and a low-level Supreme Will Realm expert. Zhou Fight would at most have the ability to protect himself facing such a line-up. He would not be able to face them head-on or even kill them. Brother! How about we deal with these 4 Supreme Will Realm experts together tomorrow? Zhou Fight suddenly said. Tomorrow? The reincarnation will was stunned, not quite understanding why he specifically mentioned tomorrow. Could it be that there was something special tomorrow? He suddenly thought of something and looked excited. Are you going to become a grade 4 Supreme God tomorrow? A grade 3 Supreme God realm was already so powerful. A grade 4 Supreme God would definitely be able to elevate his brother's strength to another level. Zhou Fight denied and explained with a smile. No. However, I should be advancing to the Supreme Will Realm tomorrow. It's not that his overall strength has advanced to the Supreme Will Realm. It's because my willpower level has to advance to the Supreme Will Realm. As for the God Spirit Realm, it's still the Grade 3 Supreme God Realm. Zhou Fight said. He had been looking forward to the Will Divine Transformation Realm for a long time. Normally speaking, it was normal for ordinary God spirits to be stuck at this stage for thousands of years, tens of thousands of years, or even longer. Chapter 1773, War Summary. 2. He had advanced from the late-stage Will Divine Transformation Realm to the Supreme Will Realm after all. It was normal for such a large class to be stuck for a long time and never be promoted. However, Zhou Fight had more than one Supreme Will Realm inheritance in his hands. He even had the Will inheritance and even the incomplete Eternal Immortal Realm inheritance. With the enhancement of so many inheritances, Zhou Fight could feel that he could now easily cross the bottleneck of advancing to the Supreme Will Realm and advance his Willpower Realm to the Supreme Will Realm. This was the benefit of having a large number of top-notch inheritances. As for the slow progress in the nomological aspect, Zhou Fight had no choice. The path of loss that everyone walked was completely different after all. It was only suitable for oneself. The other inheritances could only be used as a reference and could not be completely copied onto oneself. Zhou Zhou could only explore his own nomological path step by step. However, even so, Zhou Fight could also feel that he could advance to become a Grade 4 Supreme God within 3 days. After reaching the perfected Grade 4 Supreme God realm, he could begin to prepare to comprehend the Will technique and truly advance to the Supreme Will realm. With the Will realm at the Supreme Will realm, the Will Holy artifacts in my hands will unleash greater power. It will also be easier to control them. My various law skills will also be able to unleash greater power. At that time, with the high-level Will Holy artifact, I will have a high chance of winning even if I face a high-level Supreme Will realm. Zhou Fight thought to himself. At the same time, When Reincarnation Will saw Zhou Fight's message, he was so excited that he could not control himself. Unexpectedly, his younger brother did not advance from Grade 3 Supreme God Realm to Grade 4 Supreme God Realm. Instead, he advanced from the high-level Will Divine Transformation Realm to the low-level Supreme Will Realm. Even though it was only an increase in the Will Realm, the Will Realm of the Supreme Will Realm was enough to increase Zhou Fight's strength greatly. Just the fact that he could unleash the power of a stronger holy artifact was enough to increase Zhou Fight's strength by 2 to 3 times or even more. Before his younger brother advanced to the Supreme Will Realm, he could rely on his high-level Will Divine Transformation Realm to forcefully use his Will Holy Artifact to defeat the Martial Emperor. Before his younger brother advanced to the Supreme Will Realm, he could rely on his high-level Will Divine Transformation Realm to forcefully use his Will Holy Artifact to defeat the Martial Emperor. Reincarnation Will felt that it was very likely. If my younger brother can really advance to the low-level Supreme Will Realm, if he joins forces with me, he might really be able to destroy the remaining 4 Supreme Will Realm experts before the reinforcements of the Supreme Will arrive. The Reincarnation Will thought. Even though he was only a low-level Supreme Will Realm expert, with the authority to control reincarnation, even if he faced an high-level Supreme Will Realm expert, he could face him head-on and even have a high chance of defeating him. It was really not impossible to join forces with Zhou Zhou and deal with the remaining 4 Supreme Will Realm experts. At the thought of this, the Reincarnation Will could not help but be tempted. He thought for a while and sent a message. Okay. When you advance to the low-level Supreme Will Realm, you can inform me. Let's join forces and let this group of outsiders who occupied the Yellow River Realm stay here forever. A smile appeared on Zhou Fight's face. Then, he discussed the details with the Reincarnation Will for a while before breaking off the connection. Then, as he led the army out of the Black State Swamp, he took out the 3 Supreme Will Realm corpses and chose to extract the loots. Soon, a large number of loots appeared in his first treasure vault. Even though Zhou Fight had said that he was already prepared, he could not help but click his tongue when so many loots appeared in front of him. Good God! As expected of all the loots of the 3 Supreme Will Realm experts, the total value was almost equivalent to the value of all the treasures in his first treasure vault. He looked at it for a while before taking out the Willpower Holy Artifact. The 3 Supreme Will Realm experts added up to a total of 12 Will Holy Artifacts. Even though they were all low-level Will Holy Artifacts, Zhou Fight was still very surprised. For example, among the Supreme Will Realm experts in their Supreme Great Cosmos, it would be good enough if 1 in 3 of them had a Will Holy Artifact. The Will Holy Artifacts in the Supreme Great Cosmos were too rare after all. Unless they left the Supreme Great Cosmos to search for opportunities in the Ultimate Void Great Cosmos, most Supreme Will Realm experts would still use Supreme Divine Artifacts as their weapons and equipment. But the Illusionist clan was different. He had only encountered 4 Supreme Will Realm experts. More than 20 Willpower Holy Artifacts had been seized. As expected of the rich illusionary world. At night, in the Reincarnation Sacred Palace of the Blazing Sun Divine Capital. In the Reincarnation Sacred Palace, Zhou Fight was looking at the battle report in front of him. Under the joint efforts of the 5 battlefields, the battlefield of the Supreme Continent, the battlefield of the Ultimate Void Great Cosmos, the battlefield of Tian Jun's Corpse, the battlefield of the Crimson Great Cosmos, and the Yellow River Domain, the statistics were calculated. The Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom had obtained a total of 45,000 mist cores, origin crystals, skill books, equipment, and basic materials of various levels in the capital units today. 71 capital units, 2,311, 293, 118, 723, 297 green bronze tier Lord Talent crystal fragments. 8,123 units of Chaos Divine Treasure. 138,237,482 legendary tier and below Lord Talent spheres. A large number of Lord Talent crystal fragments of other levels. There were also 20 Guy Unit 2,391 capital units 2,347,971, 1 trillion divine crystals from low tier deity level to high tier deity level. 3,098,119,374 true God tier divine crystals. 1,412,998,841,020 Master God tier divine crystals. 1,232,949,181 Grade 1 to Grade 3 Supreme God divine crystals. 181 capital units had 2,938,347,811 million divine artifacts from low tier to high tier deity levels. 12,312,983 million true God tier divine artifacts. 28,119,811 master God tier divine artifacts. 1,812,983 supreme God divine artifacts. There were about 181 capital units with a total of 2,938,410 million divine spark fragments, God tier medicinal herbs, God tier ingredients, God tier ores, God tier blueprints, and other treasures. 3,198,827,387,122,387 master God tier herbs, God tier ingredients, God tier ores, God tier blueprints, and other treasures. 12,012,783 supreme God level God tier herbs, God tier ingredients, God tier ores, God tier blueprints, and other treasures. 8,123 supreme will realm God tier medicinal herbs, God tier ingredients, God tier ores, God tier blueprints, and other treasures. 23 will holy artifacts. In terms of insight defection, Zhou Zhou's clones had used the 2 insight defection skills of the Land of Earth, a minister of the king, and Son of Destiny today to instigate a total of 4 Guy Unit 3,498 capital units soldiers, 32,329,312,387 low-tier deity level God spirits, 23,9, 28, 78, 16 mid-tier deity level God spirits, 12,329,123,389 high-tier deity level God spirits, 71,923,378 true God tiers, 712,398 master gods, and 103 supreme wills. In addition, the Lords of the Star Alliance had also insight defection 2,938 capital units soldiers, 48,123,980,000 God spirits, more than 22 million true God tiers, and 8,121 Lord Gods. In the end, in terms of the advancement of God spirits, a total of 12,321,349,812,287 legendary tier advanced grade soldiers had been promoted to low tier deity level elementary grade God spirits. There were also 11,213,283,489 high tier deity level advanced grade God spirits who had advanced to true God tier elementary grade God spirits. Another 123,491 top-notch true gods of the human race and 803,432 top-notch true gods of the people of foreign races felt their master god tier bottleneck and applied to enter the reincarnation sacred palace to cultivate in seclusion in an attempt to break through to the master god tier realm. Moreover, there were 50 master god tier advanced grade god spirits who had sensed the bottleneck in their advancement and were also preparing to enter the reincarnation sacred palace today to advance to a grade 1 supreme god. Zhou Zhou's original military strength was 65 Guy units 559 capital units 271,198,429,878,167 soldiers, 1,096,375,759,999 God spirits, 25,734,183,552 true God tiers, 82,285 million master gods, 372 supreme gods, and 16 quasi-supreme will realms. The military strength under him had reached 69 Guy units 6,995 capital units 6,995, 342, 119, 282, 872, 387 soldiers, 124,396,712,312,391 God spirits, 44,088,699,419 true gods, 154,804 master gods, 475 supreme gods and 34 quasi-supreme will realms. Zhou Zhou nodded in satisfaction after reading it. Chapter 1774, Upgrading Territory. Glory of the Pioneer 14. 1. Zhou Zhou looked at the number of new god spirits and was very satisfied. In the past, the number of newly advanced god spirits in a day was at most 100 to 200 billion. The number of new god spirits today had actually reached more than 123 trillion. This has increased by more than 1,000 times. This kind of improvement could not be said to be terrifying. But why was it able to increase by so much? The answer was simple. Now, the subjects and soldiers that he summoned every day were at least at legendary tier elementary grade. With the help of the Supreme God Body and the Supreme Unique Lord Talent Heavenly Summoning, he had a 1% chance of summoning subjects of the legendary tier advance grade. Both of them were only one step away from the realm of deities. With the protection of the Supreme Unique Lord Talent Ares, they could obtain a massive amount of promotion energy by killing enemies in an extremely short period of time, thereby raising their strength to the God Spirit realm. This was also why so many legendary tier soldiers could advance to the God Spirit realm today. Moreover, this improvement was not a coincidence. It would be normal. He could do it today. He could do it tomorrow. Even after 10 or 100 years, so many new God spirits could appear. Moreover, as time passed, the Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom was destined to increase the number of new God spirits every day. He wouldn't stay stagnant after all. Hence, Zhou Zhou was very sure. One day, the number of God spirits under his command would exceed the total number of God spirits in the entire Supreme Great Cosmos. At that time, Zhou Zhou's prestige would be unimaginable. This was something that even God King Heaven Punishment and the Supreme Lord Reserve Army could not do. Apart from the advancement of ordinary God spirits, the advancement of true God tier, Master God tier, and even Supreme Gods also had a huge improvement. Zhou Zhou was very calm about this. As his power, strength, and the number of new God spirits continued to increase, such an increase was destined. No one could stop it. In addition to the above war summary, in terms of purchasing Chaos Divine Treasures in the Chaos Sea, the management of the Chaos Sea today bought 220 units of Chaos Divine Treasures from the Divine Kingdom Lord factions that were collecting Chaos Divine Treasures in the Time Ruins. He originally had 2,890 units of Chaos Divine Treasures. Now, with these 220 units of Chaos Divine Treasures and the 3,588 units of Chaos Divine Treasures obtained from other battlefields, it added up to 6,698 units of Chaos Divine Treasures. Zhou Zhou's eyes lit up. I've already gathered all the Chaos Divine Treasures. In addition, the other 8 beginner-grade Master God tier Lord factions needed to advance to the territory have also been conquered by Zhou Fight today. I can upgrade my territory now. Zhou Zhou thought to himself. After Zhou Fight dealt with the 3 Supreme Will Realm experts of the illusionary race, he immediately left the Black State Swamp to avoid the pursuit of the 4 Supreme Will Realm experts. However, even though he was being hunted down, Zhou Fight did not retreat from the Yellow River region. Instead, he dealt with the beginner Master God tier lords of the Illusionist clan while retreating. They easily dealt with the beginner grade Master God tier lords without much effort as he was powerful and his soldiers were not inferior. Originally, he needed 8 beginner-grade Master God tier Lord factions to upgrade his territory. However, he had quickly taken down all the lords of the 7 beginner-grade Master God tier kingdoms of the illusionary race today. As for the 8th Divine Kingdom, he didn't take it down. Instead, the Flowing Swamp God Lord had directly presented his beginner-grade Master God tier kingdom's Lord faction the Flowing Swamp Divine Kingdom to him. In this way, all the conditions for upgrading the territory were met. Without wasting any time, Zhou Zhou flew out of the Reincarnation Sacred Palace and arrived above Blazing Sun Divine Capital. He looked at his Divine Capital. He had a thought. In the next second, as 20,000 Gai units of basic materials, 1,000 Grade 1 Supreme God Divine Crystals, 1,000 Capital Units Origin Crystals, 10,000 Chaos Divine Treasures, and 100 Ultimate Void Crystals disappeared instantly. A text notification appeared. Congratulations! Your Master God tier Advanced Grade God's Kingdom, Lord's Law, has successfully advanced to Grade 1 Supreme God's Kingdom, Lord's Law. Your territory has successfully advanced to Grade 1 Supreme Territory. Your Master God tier Advanced Grade Mixed Essence 1 Heart Array has been upgraded to Grade 1 Supreme God Astral Divine King Array. Durability of Territory Stone Tablet increased to 1000 capital units /1,000 capital units. Your territory has expanded to 20 trillion km x 20 trillion km x 100 million m. All fog monsters within the territory of the new territory have been expelled. Scarlet fog will not appear in any of your territories. You have received an upgrade reward, Supreme Building Blueprint Treasure Chest, Grade 1 Supreme God. Lord Talent Notification, your Scarlet Broodmother can be upgraded. Lord Talent Hint, your Mysterious Caravan faction has increased. Lord Talent Notification, the strength of the clergy of your life arc has increased. In the next second, an even more dignified and loud voice sounded. 10,000 Races Announcement 1, Congratulations to the Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom, High-Level Master God Tier Kingdom, Blazing Sun God Lord, for becoming the first to improve your territory to grade 1 Supreme God's Kingdom, reward Supreme Treasure Chest +3, Mythical Reputation Rating Talents +10,000, Legendary Ranking +10 million, Unique Title of the Race, Glory of the Pioneer 14. Myriad Lord Announcement Channel, Congratulations Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom, High Level Master God Tier Kingdom, Blazing Sun God Lord. Chapter 1775, Upgrading Territory. Glory of the Pioneer 14. 2. Myriad Lord Announcement Channel, Congratulations Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom, High Level Master God Tier Kingdom, Blazing Sun God Lord. Lord of All Race Announcement 2, ever since the Blazing Sun God Lord opened a new Lord's territory again, the territories of all the Lords can be upgraded to grade 4 Supreme Gods. The Lords can be upgraded by checking the information of the Lords. Lord of All Race Announcement 3, in order to congratulate Blazing Sun God Lord on creating a new chapter for the Lords of all races, you are specially rewarded with 5 Premier Heart, 3 Supreme Hearts. The authority of the Supreme Lord Reserve Army had increased. The moment the announcement was made, all the races were shocked. All the leaders of the various races in the myriad worlds discussed this earth-shattering matter through the contact information of the various races. This is too ridiculous. I'm still thinking about how to build a beginner-grade Master God tier country's Lord faction. The common people's regal has actually stepped into another level and entered the ranks of the Supreme Country. As expected of the 3rd Reserve Army of the Supreme Lord, personally verified by the Supreme Will. Not only did he raise the order of his Supreme Lord Reserve Army to a new level in a short period of time, but he also raised his territory to a new height. He captured both of them, and both of them were ahead of the lords of the myriad races. I'm impressed. The common people's regal is indeed the strongest prodigy of our era. I even feel that his limelight is not inferior to the God King Heaven Punishment and the Spring Autumn Dharma Lord back then. I'm only curious about how the common people's regal obtained so many advancement resources. It's so difficult for me to even gather the resources to advance to the beginner grade Master God tier Lord realm. It's hard to imagine how the common people's regal managed to gather all the resources in advance to the Lord realm. It should be obtained in the ultimate void great cosmos, right? Otherwise, I don't believe that Your Highness can obtain so many advancement resources in our great cosmos. Our supreme great cosmos and even the neighboring crimson great cosmos don't have so many resources. I have the same guess. Our great cosmos Lord Deo developed later, unlike those top-notch Lord system great cosmoses. It's said that even Lord factions with willpower that transcend the level exist. If we can find those top-notch Lord system great cosmoses, I believe it shouldn't be difficult to gather resources to upgrade our territory. That makes sense. It seems like I have to make a trip to the ultimate void great cosmos soon. Take me with you. I'll go too. Please stop rolling and let the child lie down. All the races were discussing this matter fervently. Even Lord of 10,000 Evils, Spring Autumn Dharma Lord, and God King Heaven Punishment, who were fighting in the dusk battlefield, were stunned. Lord of 10,000 Evils, I knew Big Brother was in existence that could create a new era. Spring Autumn Dharma Lord, our new brother is getting more and more interesting. God King Heaven Punishment, good. 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 As expected of my younger brother. The future is promising, the future is promising, haha. At the same time, Zhou Zhou looked at the announcement in front of him and the smile on his face became even more obvious. This was the second time he had made history. The founder of the Master God tier kingdom and the Supreme Kingdom. This result was comparable to one of the best achievements of the Supreme Lords in their prime, the God King Heaven Punishment. Zhou Fight came back to his senses after being happy for a while. He continued reading. First was the need to upgrade his territory. Construction upgrade, 1 wood ZI unit, 1 sand ZI unit, 1 metal ZI unit, 1 stone ZI unit, 1000 grade 2 Supreme God Divine Crystals, 5000 capital units Origin Crystals, 50,000 Chaos Divine Treasures, 500 Ultimate Void Crystals, 500 Advanced Divine Kingdoms, 10 Intermediate Grade Master God Tier Kingdoms, 10 Grade 2 Supreme God Spirits, 2 billion heroes. Zhou Zhou raised his eyebrows slightly after reading it. Had he already started the ZI unit? 10,000 Guy unit was a ZI unit. This was an extremely high number of units. He shook his head and didn't think too much about it. He looked at the upgrade requirements again. Firstly, he definitely had enough basic materials. Supreme God Crystals, Origin Crystals, high-level Master God Tier Kingdoms, and the number of God Spirits who had advanced to Supreme God, as well as the 2 billion heroes, could all be met. The remaining 3 requirements were the Chaos Divine Treasure, the Ultimate Void Crystal, and the Beginner Grade Master God Tier Kingdom. Currently, he still had 24,804 units of Chaos Divine Treasures. With this number of Chaos Divine Treasures, it would be about time. The Ultimate Void Crystal was only half of it. However, Zhou Fight was not worried. The various channels of these 2 resources that he currently controlled could already provide he with a good number of Chaos Divine Treasures and Ultimate Void Crystals every day. Therefore, it was only a matter of time before they were gathered. He should be able to gather them all in less than 10 days. If the Yellow Sky Great Cosmos progressed faster, it might be even faster. It was the same for the 10 Master God Tier Intermediate Grade nations. There was definitely no Master God Tier Intermediate Grade Kingdom in the Supreme Great Cosmos and the Crimson Great Cosmos. Even the Illusionist clan in the Yellow River region did not have enough resources to quickly build a Master God Tier Intermediate Grade Kingdom. However, it didn't matter. The Yellow Heaven Great Cosmos did. Zhou 16, who was stationed in the Yellow Sky Great Cosmos, had already begun to attack the surrounding Beginner Grade Master God Tier countries and Master God Tier Intermediate Grade countries. The number of these 10 Master God Tier Intermediate Grade kingdoms looked very shocking. In the eyes of many lords, it was an impossible task. However, in Zhou 16 and Zhou Zhou's eyes, as long as the reinforcements on his side did not slack off, defeating 10 Master God Tier Intermediate Grade nations was only a matter of time. It was even possible that Zhou 16 had already conquered 10 Beginner Grade Master God Tier kingdoms before the Chaos Divine Treasure and Ultimate Void Crystals were collected. At the thought of this, Zhou Zhou could not help but raise his eyebrows. From the looks of it, the difficulty of leveling up this time was much easier than he had imagined. It was all thanks to the Yellow Sky Great Cosmos. What a treasure trove! Without the Yellow Sky Great Cosmos, he would probably be in despair when he saw this upgrade requirement. Then, he looked at the reward in the announcement. The first was the new title rewarded. Title, Glory of the Pioneer 14. Title quality, Unique title of the race. Title effect 1 You are famous among the myriad realm lords. More people admire your reputation and yearn to join your territory. The number of subjects you can summon through the gate of summoning every day plus 1400%. Among the subjects you can summon, there will be professional talents of the same level as your territory plus 15. Title effect 2, same as before. Title effect 3, when you become the first lord with a low-level supreme territory, this title will be upgraded to Glory of the Pioneer 15 and unlock more title effects. Zhou Zhou nodded in satisfaction after reading it. However, the number of subjects he could summon had increased by 14 times. In addition, among the subjects summoned, there were 15 professional talents of the same level as the territory. Which meant he could summon 15 Grade 1 Supreme God Spirit tomorrow morning. He could summon 15 Grade 1 Supreme God Spirit tomorrow morning. In the myriad worlds in the Supreme Great Cosmos, there were only more than 10,000 Supreme Gods. Now, he could actually summon 15 of them every day. If this matter were to spread, not to mention the lords of the myriad races, even a Supreme Will Realm faction would probably be jealous of him. Moreover, 15 in a day meant 1,500 in 100 days. He only needed 700 days if he wanted to reach the goal of 10,000. In 2 years, I can have a Supreme God comparable to the entire Supreme Great Cosmos. Zhou Zhou felt comfortable just thinking about it. The effect of this title was too good. And this was only the effect of the Supreme God title. What if he became the master of a Supreme territory? Could he summon 16 Supreme Will Realm experts every day? Is it really possible? What? Just thinking about it made him feel ridiculous if he could do it. Thus, Zhou Fight decided not to think about it for the time being. He would think about it when he reached that level. Thinking too much would only add to his worries.